don't like it.
I know.
Think about it. Like, please,
That is crazy.
Like,
It was
you're really
sweetie. I
not.
saw that.
Thank you. I'll make sure I'm all silenced up here.
No, so we went to Belfast. It was 69 degrees. It's crazy.
What time is your flight this morning?
Goodness.
No, but I wasn't complaining either. 69.
It's so hard coming back west, isn't it? Did you have a hard time coming back?
I lived in
I think it's harder coming back this way than going out there.
I was going to say, you have Florida connections too.
Yeah, I went to Fort Lauderdale. I feel like I lose the time coming back. Yeah, that's where you there too. Yeah.
Fort Lauderdale. It's nice. Just don't want to raise kids there.
School incredibly.
Yeah.
It's important. Right. Melissa's like, okay. Okay.
I have a friend who lives in Miami, and she wants for the kids. She sends them because they live. Well, Miami is what Miami-Dade County schools. So she's like,
Maybe Miami-Dade. Broward County's doing really well.
yeah, really? Well, my son, he went to when we lived in Fort Lauderdale. He went to I can't remember what school. It was a long time ago. But he would come home. I didn't get any recess. We don't get recess. And I'm just like, I'm sorry. And I'm gonna go there, and it's like prisons with fences are so high. And it's just I can get my mom every day.
Yeah, I went to see my old high school and I was blown away. They were all Ivy graduates and yeah. It was at the bottom of the one time.
Me too. Hyperventilating.
Call this work session to order. Dr. Watts?
Yes, please, Vice President Daniel, members of the board, staff, family, and friends. This time I would like to call our Chief Human Resources Officer, Mariah Martin, to begin our presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board. So excited to be here with you tonight, and Happy New Year to everyone. So to begin our work session of the first new year of 2020, we're presenting Buzz Porter. Buzz Porter is with Porter, Foster, and Rorick, has been an attorney for many, many years. I won't name the number, but I will share that I began working with him in 2015 when he worked with us as the lead bargainer for our KEA bargains. And he has worked in that role since that time. And so he has actually bargained. He'll probably tell you how many contracts across the state of Washington. I know it's well over 200. So he's very, very familiar with bargaining. And we wanted to take this opportunity before we go into the bargaining season just to level set and think about, okay, do we have a shared understanding of what bargaining looks like and the roles and responsibilities that we all hold in this very important process? Okay, so I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. I would encourage you to ask questions throughout. I always start every presentation with the phrase that I'd rather answer the questions you actually have than the ones I'm just guessing that you have. So please tell me what your actual questions are so I can address those. I actually do enjoy the challenge of coming back to my outline after you take us down some dead ends. So give me some dead ends to go down. I enjoy those. And then we'll come back and make sure we get our outline covered. I'm going to try to cover a lot of information very quickly. I will go fast. Slow me down if you want to go over anything slower. Pretty much what we're talking about is setting the parameters for what bargaining is under the law. And then within that law, you can start talking about strategically how you want to go about doing things, what's allowed. But I think before you can make a wise choice as to what you might want to choose to do, you should know what's allowed to be done. So that's what the parameters we're going to be talking about. This is collective bargaining. And the legal framework, as a lawyer, this is where I always start, and I will say I've been doing it for 27 years, and I'm currently somewhere between 250 and 300 contracts is what I've finished in Washington State public school districts, and that's the only place I bargain is public school districts. The source of the law, we actually have two different statutes in Washington law that govern collective bargaining. 4156 and 4159 are the two chapters of the RCW, the Revised Code of Washington. 4156 was passed first, and it only applies to classified employees. So actually classified employees in school districts had the right to bargain before teachers did. Teachers didn't get the right, which is in 4159, until 1976. But classified employees had the right since 1969 to bargain collectively. These two statutes are very similar to what most people know in the private sector as the NLRA, the National Labor Relations Act. It's an act that goes back into the 1920s and 30s as it developed over time, and that's the collective bargaining world most people know. Our state statute, the national statute exempts all state governments. So under that national statute, nobody in state government or local government has any rights to bargain. A state actually has to pass a law for local government employees, like school district employees, to have a right to bargain. And as I said, in our state, we passed 4156 in 1969, 4159 in 1976. And that's when employees for school districts had the right to bargain collectively, the same right that private sector employees had since the 1920s and 30s. There's one exception, one difference between the National Labor Relations Act and our state acts, are that there is no right to strike written into our state acts. And you can say, how can that be? You've seen teacher strikes, they do occur. Well, it doesn't, just because it happens doesn't mean it's legal. And if you've actually watched any of those particular cases, every time a strike has gone to court, it has been found to be illegal by the Superior Court judge. So it is simply, when the strikes occur, and they do occur, an act of civil disobedience. When people believe in something strong enough, they're willing to disobey a law to do it, because they're standing up for what they believe is right. The law is administered by an agency, so our state law created an agency, just like the feds have. The feds actually have two different agencies. They have the mediators, or a board of mediators, and then they have the labor board handle all of the unfair labor practices, two separate agencies. In our state, we have one agency called PERC, the Public Employment Relations Commission, and they handle both mediations and adjudications of any unfair labor practices. So they have a group of people who act as judges, but who can also act as mediators, all in one agency. Those are all funded by the state. They are not paid for by school district dollars or union dollars at all. It's all paid for out of the state budget. One of the things they do is conduct elections for exclusive bargaining reps. So when a group of employees decide that they want a union to represent them, they go to PERC, and PERC holds the election. So they administer the election, and they have a couple of people who are dedicated to doing just that work. As I mentioned, they adjudicate disputes regarding unfair labor practices. So when someone feels that one party or the other, an employer or a union, are violating the law in one of the few ways that we're going to talk about, then they can go to this body, and they will provide a judge who will decide, did you commit an unfair labor practice? And then they also mediate collective bargaining when you've reached what's called a practical impasse. And I call it a practical impasse, which is different than a legal impasse, because the term impasse has a legal meaning. But PERC will say, you don't have to wait to meet that standard legally. Call us in advance, and we'll come mediate your dispute anyway, even if it isn't technically at impasse, as that term is known under the law. If it's just you're stuck practically, they say, give us a call, we'll come mediate. They do come without charge. My joke about them is sometimes you get what you pay for. They don't have the highest salaries in the world, so they don't get a lot of people with a ton of experience. Down there right now, they've had a lot of turnover at PERC in the last 10 or 15 years, so most of their people have 5 years or less experience in mediating. It was great when they had people who had 25 years of solving labor problems, and there's only a few down there now who have that level of experience. The whole law can really be summed up in one sentence. Of course, it's a law, it's written by the legislature, so it goes on sentence after sentence. But the entire thing can be summed up in, you have a duty to bargain. That's what the law says. What does that mean? Let's break that down. First, you have a duty to bargain in good faith. That's not written into the law, but that's what the case law has interpreted the duty to bargain to mean, is you must do it in good faith. What does that mean? You have to be available. It'd be bad faith if you said, oh, sure, I'll bargain with you, but not for 2 years from now. That would not be a reasonable amount of availability. Availability doesn't mean that you have to be available every single day, 24 hours a day, unless perhaps we want schools to start and it's August 30th or something. But apart from that, you do have to make yourself reasonably available. You do have to make and respond to proposals. You can't just show up and say, I'm not going to tell you what we want, or I'm not going to respond to your proposals. You actually have to make proposals, and you have to respond to the other side's proposals. You have no duty, however, to capitulate or agree. The duty to bargain in good faith is not a duty to agree. You can draw the line and say no. No is an acceptable good faith bargaining position to take. You don't have to agree with something the other side proposes. That's not bargaining in good faith. Bargaining in good faith is trying to reach an agreement. It is not having to agree with the other side's position. What most of the cases rely on are what they call evidence of bad faith. It's where there's no one thing that is bad faith, but they'll look at a lot of different factors trying to determine, were you not really trying to get an agreement? So they look at things that they call evidence of bad faith. Mixed messages is one of those. So if on day one you tell them that you'll give them a 1% raise, the next day you'll tell them a 0% raise, that might be evidence of bad faith because it's a mixed message. So they think you weren't really trying hard to get a deal there. Another one is deceptive practices. You lie at the table about something. That's not good faith trying to reach an agreement. Regressive proposals, that 1% then going down to 0% would be a regressive proposal. You weren't trying to get closer to the other side. If they started out with, oh, we want a 10% raise, but then they get mad at us and they say that, oh, now we want a 15% raise, that would be a regressive proposal. It by itself wouldn't necessarily be an unfair labor practice, but it might be evidence of bad faith. That, along with other things, they'll look at and they say, was somebody not really trying to reach an agreement here? If so, then it's bad faith bargaining. So the duty to bargain means we have to bargain in good faith. We also have, what do we have to bargain? That's the next thing. You don't have to bargain everything in the world. What you have to bargain are mandatory subjects of bargaining. That's a technical legal term. There are 3 categories that PERC has put all subjects in the world fall in one of these 3 categories: mandatory, permissive, or illegal. Mandatory are things you have to bargain. If the other side asks you to bargain it, you have to bargain over that topic. A permissive topic is one that you don't have to bargain, but you're allowed to bargain if you want to. An illegal subject is one that even if you wanted to, you're not allowed to bargain. An example of that last category, which hardly ever comes up, but an example would now be around insurance. Where we've moved to the state insurance system, the SEB, School Employees Benefits Board. If they came in and said, we want you to provide us insurance through Primera, and we said, we're sorry, it's illegal for us to provide anything other than SEB insurance, it would be illegal for us to even counter-propose, oh no, let's go with Regents instead of Primera. That's an illegal proposal to make. The mandatory versus permissive, that line between there is where all the disputes end up when they reach the ULP area. Mandatory is defined as wages, hours, and working conditions, those 3 categories. If it's related to wages, how much money you're going to pay me to do the work, the hours, how many hours can you make me work, or working conditions, which honestly is the fuzziest of those 3. Those are the 3 categories you must bargain over. And whenever there's a dispute, most often it's what falls in what's a working condition. There are a few cases out there where PERC has found some things are not working conditions. The school district's budget. They said, for example, you don't have to bargain over the budget. The budget is statutorily assigned to the school board, and the school board is allowed to set the budget. However, they also said 85% of what's in the budget could be related to staffing or wages, and you do have to bargain over those. So we're going to have to bargain over working conditions, how many staff I have on the job and how much I'm paying that staff. And yep, that's going to make up probably 85% of your budget. But you don't have to bargain the budget, they've said. So that also falls into a category that even when it's not a mandatory subject, it could be an impact. And you have to bargain impacts. So for example, the number of staff, let's say we want to decrease the number of a particular type of position that we have. I have a district right now who has a videographer, and they have 2 of them. And if they only want to have 1 videographer instead of 2, and they want to reduce that number, PERC would say that your decision on staffing is a management right to make that decision. But you would possibly, if they requested bargaining, have to bargain over the impacts of which one of those 2 is going to get laid off. Are you going to use seniority to determine that? Or are you going to use evaluation ratings to determine which one? Do they get any layoff benefits? Those kinds of things are the impacts that you would have to bargain over, even though the subject itself of laying somebody off is your right to make, a management right. You still have to bargain over the impacts of that decision. Moving on, what else does the duty to bargain mean? Who do you bargain with? You have to bargain with the exclusive representative. And what that means is you cannot bargain directly with your employees, and it's an unfair labor practice if we start talking directly to employees about bargaining subjects. And this comes up often. It's very tempting to do because we know teachers. You see them in the grocery store. You see them out when you're walking around schools, and you want to start talking to them about a topic that might be coming up in bargaining. If you, as an individual board member or anybody representing the district, were to have a conversation directly with employees about that in a way that would be seen like you are trying to persuade them of a position or to get information from them about their position, that would be going around the exclusive representative that they have elected to represent them, which in your case with teachers is KEA. All of your unions have different elected representatives. You have to deal with the elected representatives and who they send to the bargaining table. We don't get to pick who they send to the bargaining table. They don't get to pick who you send to the bargaining table, but each side has to deal with the representatives that each side picks to bargain. We can't go around them directly to the members. In the same way, unfortunately, they can go around directly to you. And that would be in the private sector, an unfair labor practice for them to go around it's like you pick a team to go be your representative and bargain for you, and if they were to come around that team and start talking directly to you, that would be a ULP. However, because you are a public body, they still have a constitutional right to address the people that are elected and your elected officials. So they still get to address you, but you cannot bargain back with them. And I will tell you practically as a board member, that's a really tough line to have to try to follow. That they get the right to talk to you, you don't get the right to bargain back directly with them. You have to bargain with their elected representative. As I mentioned, each side determines who speaks for that party. What are the options? What happens if you can't reach an agreement under the law? Like I said before, you have no duty to agree. You don't have to agree to their proposals. They don't have to agree to your proposals. But what happens if you don't agree? Number one is impasse mediation. As I mentioned, PERC will provide mediators. We could hire our own mediators if we want to, but if you get to a stuck place, sometimes it helps to bring in a third party to help facilitate those discussions between you. So impasse mediation is one option. In the certificated statute only, 4159, they threw in this extra step called fact-finding. It's very, very rarely used. It's been in the law since 1976, and I can't think of maybe one time in the last, what are we at, in the last 30 years, since 1980, I think it's only one time that it's been used that I can think of in Washington schools. And one of the reasons it's never used is because it's not binding. It is just, we're going to basically have a show trial in front of the public to some third party, a fact finder, who will come in and make a recommendation on who they think has the best offer. But it's not binding on either side. And so it does become a show trial, and that's how it was used the first few years between 76 and 80. Some unions and districts tried to use it. And the idea is to create some public pressure that if there was some third party who saw both proposals and recommended which proposal they thought was better, that somehow that would put more pressure on the sides to reach agreement. In practice, that didn't actually occur. That sometimes when you embarrass the other side by showing the world how their proposal, or them showing the world how unreasonable our proposal is, actually makes that party dig in further rather than want to give in. I actually find, as a practical matter, strategically, when you embarrass the other side, it makes them harder to bring back to a reasonable and rational place. So we've not found fact-finding to be a very effective tool for helping parties reach agreement. The third is unilateral implementation. Under the law, an employer, when you reach legal impasse, not just a practical I'm stuck, but you're technically at the level in the law that they would call impasse, an employer can implement your last, best, and final offer. That's a technical legal term. Because of that, I am very, very wary to ever use that. I don't want to call something my last, best, and final because it's really a clue. You're telling the other side, I'm not going to bargain with you anymore, and I'm just going to implement. Very, very rarely have employers in the public sector ever tried to do unilateral implementation. I can think of maybe one time in my career I ever got to this place. Usually the union will then want to trigger what they can do, which would be strikes. That's, as I mentioned before, unlawful civil disobedience, but it is when somebody believes in something strong enough, something they're willing to do. And that's usually when we threaten to unilaterally implement our last, best, and final offer, where you will end up is at a strike. So I tend to not use that. I instead, this is more of a strategy than a law thing, basically have made a commitment to never stop trying to reach an agreement. I don't believe there is any place where it's impossible to reach an agreement. I think there are places where it's impossible to communicate with the other side, and I will look for other means to do so. But my basic rule is to never give up trying to reach an agreement. That's the law. What does it look like in practice? Practically, you take that one statute, which has one sentence that says you have a duty to bargain. What does it look like in practice? Having spent years of my life doing this, it's about 50% of all my hours every year for the last 27 years. There's a traditional process, and there is the sort of other end of the spectrum, what we call an interest-based process. Usually it's easier for people to understand the traditional process first before they can understand how different the other process is. So I'll talk about the traditional bargaining process first. The pure traditional or positional model. Usually the parties will come together and talk about what the ground rules are, the process, what schedule, how many times are we going to meet, when are we going to meet? Are we meeting outside the school day, during the school day? Who talks at the table? Rules like that. Sometimes they'll even write them up as ground rules. Then the next step, you'll exchange your initial proposals. Usually those are in writing. Under the certificated statute, it actually says one party can require the other side to put it in writing. I've never had anybody not put it in writing. They put your proposal in writing. We usually do it because most of these places we're not doing a first contract. We've had a contract that's been in place for decades. So what you're really proposing are changes to an existing contract. So what they'll do is they'll give us a contract that with strikeouts for the things they want to take out of the contract, underlining for the things that they want that are new in the contract. We will do something similar and talk about what are the things we want to change that are in that contract. And you exchange that mutually. We see what they want to bargain about, they see what we want to bargain about. Then usually the parties will separate. Well, there'll be some discussion first, but you have to develop a written counterproposal next. So usually the parties will separate, go off into what we call a caucus, and write a counterproposal. Sometimes in the olden days, it was as easy as saying yes, 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 no, 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 yes, no, yes, no. And you come back in and you give them that. And you say yes or no to theirs. Because we have word processing software and everything, now parties are saying a little bit more than yes or no. Usually we're actually cutting and pasting in a word processing program actual counter proposals so they can see instead of this, we would do this. Or if we're saying yes, let's print it out. And exactly what we're saying we will change. Generally then the parties will reach what are called a tentative agreement on any issues where they can reach an agreement. So if it's on this section of the contract, we agree we're done talking about overtime rates for bus drivers. We've reached an agreement that we're going to pay time and a half after X number of hours. That's our rule, and we've agreed on that issue. We'll set it up. I'll want it in writing. Oftentimes, if there's some level of distrust among the parties, you'll do things such as get signatures on that document, that this is the tentative agreement we've reached. You then set aside that issue and keep working on the other 99 issues that are still out there. And you keep trying to get as many issues over into the TA pile as you can and narrow the number of issues that are left still to be discussed. And on those, you just keep going back and forth, offering counter proposals. And you have to figure out, sometimes it gets confusing, which side of the table is an issue on, who was the last one who proposed on this issue. There are some people who are better organized than others in terms of getting all of the issues on one side of the table or not. And part of the process here is about who can be best organized to not lose things and let them fall through the cracks. But you could just keep trading counter proposals until you can reach an agreement on something. One side has come up with a proposal the other side can say yes to, you sign off. Oftentimes at the end, it's very, very common when we're getting down to a few number of issues, and I will say 95% of the time, those are usually monetary in value because people have the hardest time making a final decision on monetary items, so they ended up being saved to the end. They'll often package together. So we'll say, I'll say yes to your salary proposal and your insurance proposal, but I'm going to say no to your overtime proposal and your staffing proposal. Is that package okay? And that's the way you'll get an agreement at the end, is by packaging several of those things together to find the right package that works for the parties. Because of that proposal, because of that style of proposing, often parties will throw lots of extra issues in there because they think things are going to get packaged at some point and have to be dropped, and so they make up what I call fake issues to put on the table as part of this process. So I have something I can give up on. It's that kind of game-playing strategy that goes on in this kind of bargaining. This kind of bargaining, my other way of describing it is car negotiations. It's the very traditional, what you think about when you're going to buy a car, that you don't believe the other side is really telling you their bottom line, and so you're not going to give them your bottom line. And you're both trying to hide your bottom lines and come to a number that you can both agree upon. That's what this process feels like, very much. It's all about hiding your bottom lines, not telling the other side until you can get to a number you're both willing to say, I'm done. I can agree to that number and move on. It's still after that, after you have a final settlement where all the issues are resolved, you still have to have ratification. They have to take it back to their members and have their membership vote on the whole thing. We've got to bring it back to the board and have the board vote on the whole thing. It is, however, an unfair labor practice for either of those ratifying bodies not to ratify something that was in the parameters they gave their bargaining teams. So if you told us, and I don't like these kinds of parameters, but if you did, you told us, okay, we will agree to a 2% raise, and we came back to you with a 2% raise, and you said no to it, that could be bad faith bargaining, because we went in and told them we could agree to a 2% raise. And what you did is just send a mixed message and disavow something that you said you would do. So that's why it's very, very important in this process to set parameters at the beginning. We have to know, as your representatives, if we're going and representing you, whoever that team is, has to know what will the board say yes or no to. Because when it comes back, the board's got to say yes to it if it's within your parameters. Sure, if it's outside the parameters, you can say no to it. But if it's within what you told us you would say yes to, it's an unfair labor practice to not say yes to it at that point in time. And that's why it's really important we know what those parameters are. There is an alternative way to bargain. And most people will take at least 3 days of a workshop to understand this. I'm going to try to give it to you here in about 3 minutes. The way that I describe interest-based or collaborative bargaining models is by 2 parables and 1 metaphor. The first one is the parable of the orange. There was a parent who had 2 children who were fighting over the last orange in the house. The parent gets tired of the children fighting, takes a knife, cuts the orange in half, and gives half to each child and says, "Go away, I'm tired of listening to you argue over the orange." And they both start crying and wailing and very unhappy with that solution. And the parent says, "Why? I gave you each orange. You both wanted orange. I gave you each some orange." And that's when one child says, "I needed the rind of a full orange to make this art project that I'm doing for school." And the other child says, "I needed the juice from a full orange for this recipe for a cake that I'm baking." The lesson here is that if the parent had asked the why question before they cut the orange, they could have given both children what they needed. One could have had the rind from a full orange. The other could have had the juice from a full orange if you had asked the why question in advance. So one of the lessons from here is ask why to understand why a party wants something, not just what they want. The second is a metaphor that I use, the metaphor of the onion. An onion has layers. When you look at any bargaining issue, really any issue when you're in a disagreement with somebody, you need to peel back layers, which I do by asking the question why multiple times. An example would be somebody comes to me and says, "I need a 10% raise." Why? Help me understand why you need a 10% raise. "I need a 10% raise because my heating bill went up 25% last year." Why did your heating bill go up 25% last year? And if you keep asking that why question, eventually you might come down to an understanding of what the underlying need was, which most people will tell you come down to one of Maslow's hierarchy of needs: a need for shelter, a need for companionship, a need for all of those kinds of things. But if you understand that, it can open up the world to different solutions for meeting that need that is not necessarily a 10% raise. What if I were to negotiate a 25% discount for all school employees on heating oil from the local power company? That would solve the same problem, and I wouldn't have to give a 10% raise. But you're only going to get that kind of a solution if you understand why they were asking for the 10% raise first. So asking the why question and asking it multiple times over and over. Also, like an onion, however, if you keep peeling back the layers, you eventually find there is no core to an onion. It is just layers. So the lesson there is you can ask why too many times sometimes. That was a lesson I had to learn about 5 or 6 years into my bargaining career. Sometimes you have to stop asking why and actually get to finding a solution. The last parable is the parable of the bear. And when I was told this story, I was told that this actually comes out of Minnesota, but some people who have listened to me tell this story have done Googling research and think it actually comes from the state of Washington, somewhere up in the North Cascades. It deals with workers who are electrical line workers. Those are the people who keep the electrical lines up and running, and they're the ones out there fixing them during storms. Well, during the winter, I was told in Minnesota, someone else told me in Washington State, during the winter, icicles form on those lines and start bringing the lines down. And the electricity and power will go out, and we send electrical line workers out into the wilderness where there are bears to fix those lines. It's not a fun job. It's cold and it's dangerous. So a bunch of electrical line workers are sitting around the break room one day complaining about having to go out into the cold, dangerous wilderness to fix electrical lines. And they said, wouldn't it be fun if we can get the bears to do this for us? Oh, they all had a nice little laugh about that. Yeah, we're gonna get the bears to fix the line for us. And someone else said, oh no, I got it. This is how we're gonna do it. We're going to put buckets of honey at the top of the electrical poles, and that way the bears will climb up the poles reaching for the buckets, and somehow that's going to shake the lines, and so all the icicles will fall off. And they all said, oh, that's really not so good. How are they gonna do, if they get the honey before they actually reach for the icicles, it's not gonna work. Someone else, I'm gonna build on that. What we're gonna do is we're gonna climb those poles and we're gonna hang them on the electrical line itself. And so the bears will have to reach out toward the bucket of honey and knock all the icicles off for us. And then somebody else said, well, that's a dumb idea too, because who's gonna go out into the cold wilderness and hang those buckets of honey except us? It's the exact same thing we have to do right now. And then somebody else said, oh wait, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna fly helicopters in and lower the buckets of honey on a line and hook them on the electrical lines, and then the bears will climb up the poles, reach for the honey, knock off the icicles, and we don't have to go out in the cold. And that's when somebody said, aha, light bulb went off. If we're running helicopters low enough over the electrical lines, the downdraft from the blades will naturally knock all the icicles off. And to this day, that is how they handle icicles supposedly in the wilderness on electrical lines in Minnesota or Washington State, wherever the story actually occurred. But you only get to that elegant solution if you tolerated a lot of crazy outside the box thinking, things that were never gonna be the right solution. Oh, we're gonna have the bears do this for us. So it's a lesson in brainstorming. So if you take the orange, the bear, and the onion, and you put it all together, what kind of process would you come up with? It's what we call an interest-based bargaining process. It'll start the same way. The parties still have to come together and agree on what process we're going to use. When are we going to meet? How often are we going to meet? But then instead of exchanging proposals, what the parties do is create a joint list of issues or problems that they want to bargain or resolve. You then identify the interests, what we call the why, underlying each issue. So if the issue is, the issue could be my heating oil. That's the problem. It's my heating bills. That's the problem we want to bargain about. Instead of coming with a proposal that says I want a 10% raise, you come in with the problem. And you say, we're going to come together now as a joint team, doesn't matter who you represent, and we're not leaving this room until we have a solution to heating prices going up 25%. That's our problem to solve. Let's understand why. Why did those things go up? Why is that a problem for you? We understand the interests underlying, and you understand both sides' interests on that issue. Because we might have an interest like, oh, we don't want to go into debt. We don't want the state taking over our finances of our school district. That would be an interest that an employer would have. Once you understand the why, the interests, you then go into a brainstorming mode and you brainstorm options. And there are parties, I've been involved in a bargain where we've papered a room this size with butcher paper all the way around 250 different options with people, because you don't judge options as they're being generated. The brainstorming process is to separate the judging from the inventing. You just throw up any idea that meets one or more of the interests, because that's what you're trying to do. You then have to find some way to narrow and test. How do you, and at most of the time we're not talking 250 options, and I'll tell you it's nearly impossible when there are 250 options, but often you will end up with 10, 15, 20 different options, and you have to find some way to narrow that 10 or 15 until you can reach consensus. And you try to build a consensus where everyone in the room can say, I can support this idea. Even if it wasn't my preferred solution that I walked into the room with, it solves the problem. It meets the interests. And we'll often do things like using a thumbs method. We'll use, I'm a blocker if it's a thumbs down. It's my best idea if it's a thumbs up. Thumbs sideways, I can live with it. I won't block it. And you try to get everybody to at least thumbs up, nobody at thumbs down. So it gives everybody in the room power. It empowers every person. Everyone has to be at least thumbs sideways. It doesn't mean I'm going to get what I want all the time, a thumbs up, but it means everyone's going to be here. I do worry sometimes, by the way, if the entire room is thumb sideways, that means nobody's happy with the solution, and then I have a hard time thinking that it's going to be implemented very effectively. But we try to get everybody at least to something they can tolerate as the solution to the problem, and that's what you tried to build consensus on. And then you bring those solutions back to their ratifying bodies. It still goes back to the membership to vote yes, and it comes back to the board to vote yes or no on it. That's an interest-based process. It's a different way of looking at it, particularly in the beginning. And I will tell you, anytime you bring in somebody new, this process takes a lot of time, and most people lose patience with it. And so they say they will revert back to a competitive bargaining process because they don't have enough patience for how much time this would take to actually talk about through all of these things. And people distrust whether or not they're going to get what they wanted when they walk in. So there's a lot of distrust around this process. But I will tell you that there are some places where this is used very effectively. Most places that use it, I will tell you, are not a pure interest-based place nor a pure traditional bargain place. Most people are somewhere on the spectrum in between there. You don't want to take this length of a time on an easy issue. If you're looking at how do we fix typos in the contract, using this process is probably a waste of your time on fixing typos in a contract. But if you're talking about a really difficult, complex problem to solve, particularly if the parties aren't really sure what the best solution to it is, this kind of a process can be very effective in coming up with a more effective solution than simply, can I persuade you that I had the best idea when I walked in the room, which is what the other process is. So it's an alternative. Those are practically what it looks like in bargaining. And I will say in schools, there's something about, if you haven't figured it out yet, maybe new to this, in schools, we're a little more touchy-feely than probably any other public sector group out there. We have gravitated in schools more toward interest-based bargaining processes than most public sector areas, and the private sector as well. It has been used effectively in the private sector, but I will say in schools, this has resonated a lot more with educators, I think. It's because of the type of people that we draw into this industry that kind of a problem-solving process can resonate with them a little bit more. What's the role of the board in all of this? That's really the big question we were talking about today. Number one, as I mentioned, to define parameters. You have to tell us what will and will not be acceptable to the board. The parties who represent you have to know that going in. And that can't change, because if it changes, then we have to be very careful that we didn't misrepresent something we said at the table that could be regressive. As I talked about, there are two styles of bargaining. There's also two styles of parameters that you can set for us. You can set what we call positional parameters. That'd be the traditional. You are allowed to give a 2% raise and no more. Or you are allowed to agree to X dollars for new staffing and no more. That's all we will say. That'd be a positional parameter. Or a positional parameter could be something that's not that specific in numbers, but could still be very specific in position, that you're not going to change. An example of that might be, I had one district I had to bargain for many, many years ago, who refused to require employees to have to pay a union representation fee before the Janus case. And that was a political position that board was taking for political reasons and who they were. They did not want an employee to have to pay a representation fee, and they set that out for us. We will not say yes to any deal you bring back to us that has a representation fee and as part of the contract. That would be a position. An interest-based parameter, on the other hand, would be not setting the why or the how we get something done, but setting the parameter based on why you want something. What I like about those, not that it gives the parties more flexibility, which it does, but it actually, I think, gets to something that is easier to stick harder to. When you set positional parameters, I think it's actually easier to have to waver, because someone's going to come up with a better idea than what you had to begin with. So for example, if your parameter was you're allowed to give a 2% raise and no more, but somebody else came in and gave you an offer that, gee, we will take 3% of money out of our contract if you'll give us 3% in salary. And that actually will save the district money in the long run. but it violates your positional parameter. If instead what you had done was set an interest-based parameter and said, we do not want our ending fund balance to go below X number, we don't care what raise you give. You can take other money out of the contract and put it into salaries, whatever it is, but as long as our ending fund balance doesn't go below this number, that would be an interest-based parameter. You want to make sure that you have a reasonable fund balance to cover yourself in an emergency. That would be the why you want it. So understanding that why gives the parties more flexibility. I also think it's easier for you to stick to that, because it's going to be harder if you set that hard parameter of a 2% raise only, and people come up with a better idea, and you can't waver from that unless you're then capitulating. And once you start capitulating or changing your mind, which you can change your mind on something and come closer to a union on a position. But then once you start doing that, they're going to think that they can do that well on any issue. If, however, you set interest-based parameters, I think it's very easy for boards to say, we set those at the beginning. In fact, we can probably set certain interest-based parameters for the next 5 years, and we're not going to change them. We don't care. Don't come back to us unless your solution meets our interests. And these are our interests. These are the why we wanted something. Not what we want, but why we wanted it. So I encourage parties to think long and hard about the why of any parameters that they set, rather than simply the what or the how. Number 2, my advice on defining parameters: avoid return trips to check or change parameters. Every time we come back to you, it's an opportunity for you to change your mind. And honestly, when you start changing your mind and the union sees that you start changing your mind, it makes us a much less reliable communicator at the bargaining table. So I don't like return trips. I like you to tell me, this is what we told you we wanted, don't come back until you get it. That's the direction I like. Because that tells me then, it doesn't matter what pressure games are going to be played, we don't have an opportunity to change the parameters, and they're only going to say yes to what's within their parameters. So that's actually my preference, is for you to tell me what you want and then tell me not to come back to you until I get it. Number 3, avoid drawing artificial lines in the sand. This is what I find the problem with positional parameters. They become an artificial line. And then the game becomes, not did I need a 3% raise as a union to get a yes out of my members, but can I prove to you that what you said was the limit really wasn't the limit? And that with the really good union bargainers on the other side, they're very good at doing that, of sniffing out when is something an artificial line in the sand. We've said no, the board will not agree to a 3% raise, and they will find some way to prove to you, well, I can make you say yes to a 3% raise just because you put a line in the sand. And I hate that that's what the game becomes. And so that's why I don't like to draw lines in the sand. And I tell my boards, don't give me a line in the sand, give me a why you wanted something, and then never vary from your why. That avoids that game playing. Number 4, as I mentioned, you have a duty to ratify tentative agreements within the board's parameters. If it's within what you've told us you will agree to, you have to say yes to it. Role of the board, number 2, separate from the parameters. The other important role, it's not written in the law anywhere, but I will tell you it's a very important role for school districts. It's that steady eye on the big picture, direction, and vision of where the district is going. Somebody has to have vision to tell us this is what we've asked for and why we're going to get there. And it's so hard to maintain that vision when you're down in the actual negotiating of things. It's not that we're going to lose track of your parameters, because we know what those are. You've given that to us. But in the day-to-day of they said yes to this, they said no to that, we said no to this, and we said yes to that, it can be very easy to forget, why are we doing any of this at all? We need the board, I think, the best role you can provide for us is that always that eye on that big picture. Where are we going and why are we getting there? That direction and that vision of where you want to take the district. That's really, really important. It's a leadership quality, and that's what we're expecting out of our board, is to be our leader, to tell us where you want to take the district. To do that, my suggestions are to focus on parameters rather than strategy, because what happens in strategies, you get caught up in the metaphor I use is a roller coaster. Bargaining is a roller coaster, and it's crazy. There's up days and downs. I think we're getting an agreement today. Oh, I think we'll never get an agreement. Oh, I think we're going to get an agreement today. Oh, I think we'll never get an agreement. And emotionally, the bargaining team has to go through that. That's their job, is to live through all of those ups and downs. But if I take every single one of you, all of the leadership team of the district on that same vision, we all get queasy. And nobody keeps their eye on that big picture. Somebody needs to stay out of the ups and downs and say, that's the end over there. I don't care how many times you go up and down, that's the end we're going to get to. And I think that's an important role for the board to be able to serve, is to keep their eye on where we're going and not the day-to-day, how are we getting there. You just hold our feet to the fire to make sure we get there at the end. Number 2, the importance of leadership and organizational stability, leading by example. If you want a stable organization, I think leading in a way that is stable is a way to do that. It sets an example for us to follow. So I think organizational leadership is very important in this process. Helpful behaviors that do this. Number 1, confidentiality helps. It promotes candor and trust and risk-taking. When parties are not confidential, nobody wants to take a risk anymore. Nobody's going to throw out that crazy idea of a bear climbing up the electrical pole if they know that that crazy idea is going to get broadcast on a billboard someplace. And they're going to be embarrassed by, oh, you're the one who came up with the bear climbing the electrical pole story. You're never going to get crazy ideas that lead you to the good ones if you embarrass people by those things. So that's why I find in the process confidentiality to be a great tool. It allows people to be dumb and stupid. It allows them to be able to live past their mistakes, and we all make mistakes. And if we are living in an environment where people are not allowed to make mistakes, and I will tell you that it's actually one of the biggest problems I see in public sector governance right now, when we're doing it in front of the public, is every single mistake gets magnified and held against you. Everything that you say when you try to reach agreement amongst the 5 of you board members, and you have to do it publicly, you better not make a mistake, because everyone's watching you and going to put it on Facebook when you do. It's a really tough place to be. And it makes it hard for people to take risks. It's hard, it doesn't promote candor or trust. In fact, it promotes a lot of distrust because everyone's worried about making that mistake, what's going to be held against them. Leaks, things that are going on in the bargain that get leaked out of the bargain, start creating ripple effects. That's the other problem I find. And so I come back after a full day of bargaining and somebody that night went home and put on Facebook what they thought the proposal was. It goes out to the entire district, and all of a sudden there's this chatter all night long on Facebook as to what the district proposed yesterday. The next day in bargaining, instead of getting back to solving the problem, I'm probably going to spend the next 2 hours trying to shove the leak back in. It wastes a lot of time. All those ripple effects of now all those people who thought a proposal that was never agreed upon is now somehow going to be the new law of the land. And I have to unwind all of that. So it wastes a lot of time. There are backlashes that all of a sudden where you thought parties were getting a little flexible on something and might be getting close to an agreement, once it goes public like that, oh, no, all of a sudden the parties can't back down from their original position. It's what they told their members they were going to get, what we told you we were going to get. Nobody can back down and reach a creative solution anymore. And it's basically a distraction. Instead of trying to reach an agreement, we end up bargaining over PR rather than the issue we came to bargain about. Secondly, unity and consensus helps. You have no duty to agree amongst yourselves, but I will tell you that when you do, it makes it easier to represent you. So if you can find a way to reach consensus amongst yourselves as board members as to what direction you want the district to go, it makes it easier to reach agreements. The same thing is true on the other side, and I admit this all the time. It is so much easier for me to bargain with unions who are unified directly behind their membership, behind their leadership, than it is from unions who are split. Sometimes I have to bargain with unions I call the 60-40 unions, where only 60% of the members voted for the president and the 40% voted for somebody else. They're actually a much harder union for me to bargain with because I never know when is that 10% going to flip the other direction. That party can't take any risks with me because they're always worried about losing just 10% of the members and all of a sudden they've lost their position. I love it. There was the toughest person to bargain with in the state of Washington in public schools in 50 years, and he had the position for 40 years in one school district. Toughest person to bargain against, but I will tell you, he was mean, he was nasty many times. He also was the most reliable bargaining partner I ever had. When he said yes to something, I could tell you there was going to be a 99.9% yes vote of his members when he said it. He would ensure that. He would twist whatever arms necessary to make sure everybody in his union voted yes for it. And it made him a very, very reliable bargaining partner. I'll tell you, it took me several years to get to that point to appreciate that. But after many years, 18, bargaining with him, I will tell you that I love it when somebody has 100% of their members behind them. It's true for them. It's true for us. We are easier to bargain with when there's 100% of the board members behind us. Doesn't mean that you have a duty. There's no legal duty to agree amongst yourselves. But when you do, it makes us better, easier representatives to reach agreement. calm and patience is the other thing that's a helpful behavior. The more often that you do not show patience, that you are not calm about something, the more often strategies will be used to try to change your position that way. So the more often you react to external pressure, the more often it's used. If external pressure does not get what the other party wants, they'll find a different strategy. They'll leave that one alone, and then there's no more external pressure. And I was talking about that really, really tough bargaining person who I worked with for many, many years. I will tell you that he didn't use external pressure. They stopped coming to board meetings even when they maybe should have been there. They never showed up at board meetings, never spoke to the board members because it had no impact on how we went about bargaining. He was very good at his job, and his members have the highest salaries in the state of Washington, and he's very proud of that. But I will tell you that he didn't use external pressure that we often see in most places where many unions who feel the way to get what they need is to try to twist your arms publicly. And if you don't like that, one way to do it is to not react. Pretty simple. Number 4, helpful behaviors to respect the process. That means declining to discuss the process away from the bargaining table. Every time you want to go have a conversation about what's going on in bargaining, that's not respecting the process. It's not respecting that they elected a representative. You elected representatives to be there at the bargaining table. And if instead you want to go have a conversation with the union president even their elected representative, you're doing it away from the process that was set up to reach an agreement. And that can harm the process. It could eventually lead to an unfair labor practice as well. Some unhelpful behaviors, and most of these likely would be a ULP, an unfair labor practice. Interference, that's one type of a ULP. It's when we get involved in the internal affairs of the union. And this is very tempting. You don't like that particular union president, and so we want a different person to be elected. But if we get involved in their elections internally, that's called an interference violation, and it's an unfair labor practice. So we stay a million miles away from who they select as their representative. That's not our business. Number 2, retaliation. This is also an unhelpful behavior when it's an unfair labor practice to discriminate against somebody for being involved in labor activity. So if all of a sudden all the members of their bargaining team got transferred out of their schools and they didn't want that transfer, that could be seen as a retaliatory action. We can't do it because they're involved in bargaining. Bad faith. Talked about that earlier. Deceptive or regressive behaviors are also a behavior that it could be a ULP. It's also not helpful to reaching an agreement. 4, inconsistency, changing the target. That's bad faith. Or, this one comes up often, attempts to be the hero during labor strife by bargaining away from the table. It's very tempting, particularly I'll tell you when it's September 5th and you happen to know personally the person who is leading the union, it's very tempting to say, let's go out for coffee and find a solution to this. But I found this particular behavior could lead you into an unfair labor practice when they don't like the solution that you proposed. They're then going to accuse you of going around the process. Those are all things, unfortunately, I can tell you I have actually seen happen in schools. That's everything very quickly. But I do have time for questions. Anything I can answer for you?
What has the district used before? Do they use parameters? What has the board come up with before in past years for bargaining? What method have they used? Have they used interest-based, coming up with the whys,
Yeah.
or have they come up with you could only give them a 2% raise?
So from a bargaining process, I happen to know, I wasn't involved in it, but historically, interest-based bargaining was taught and used here in Kent many years ago. There was a strong movement in the 1990s. The Washington Education Association supported this, spent a lot of money actually training their bargaining teams to do it. They'd pay for joint teams to go do training together, and Kent was one of the leaders in that area. So until through the late 90s at least, some of the best trainers in the entire world, in my opinion, the Glazers, were here working in Kent doing interest-based bargaining training. For a lot of reasons I can speculate as to why, but I couldn't tell you for sure because I wasn't involved. Most of those processes fell away, dropped, got changed. And by the time of 2009, you were back to a traditional bargaining process. And the parties did use more traditional parameters from our side, and the process used at the table was traditional. It was exchanging proposals. And since that time, the process at the table has remained that way. It's a very traditional process. I can comment that I think it's often a disorganized traditional process in many ways. But at least I'm talking mostly about the teacher side, which is where I had experience here. That's the way it has worked. I'm thinking on the classified side, I know that since that time, the parties have worked together to try to get closer back to interest-based. And it's unfortunate, I can use that term for it, but often the classified employees will often trend-wise follow many years after the teachers. The teachers will try something, and then classified employees will follow later. And so classified employees now, I think, are starting to see some of the value in the interest-based process. So you're starting to see some classified groups use that, but it was usually a few years after teachers did. And at least in Kent, they have reverted back to a traditional model. Simply because at the table we use traditional does not mean that you have to choose to use traditional parameters. You can still set interest-based parameters. It's what I call one-sided interest-based bargaining, and it's what I teach. I teach a workshop on bargaining. I say, even if the other side doesn't agree to use this process, you can still learn something from looking at things through a lens of what was the interest. It can help me brainstorm a better counterproposal. Even if I have to put it in a counterproposal format, it's going to be more likely to be accepted if I understand why the party proposed what they proposed. And so I still teach the use of interest-based as an analytical tool to understand what's going on at the table and hopefully, even in a traditional process, make it easier for us to find an agreement. So yes, I think at least in the last couple of years, we have asked for interest-based parameters. They're not easy to set, I will tell you. There are some who are pretty good at it. I've worked with North Shore for, 12 years or so now, and their board had a long tradition. And basically, once a year, they just revisited the exact same 5 parameters they have set 12 years ago. And they say, are these still the 5, are our why, no matter what issue we're talking about? These are the 5 interests that we're going to have, and they reaffirm those or tweak them each year, that those are the 5, and they don't have to change them. And it's been a nice way to bargain from a parameter perspective. But it's hard for people sometimes to understand the why. It's easier to go to the what. That's nice and clear, black and white for people. It's tougher than that to understand why I want something.
The only thing I would add to that is this year we bargained with the principals, and they engaged in interest-based bargaining with us. Both parties agreed to be trained in interest-based bargaining. They spent quite a bit of time, so the legal and labor team did that. We've done interest-based bargaining recently, I believe, with, remind me, Joanne, I believe the paras, and then we've also engaged with some other classified unions. We always offer that as an option. We like the interest-based approach, but it requires both parties to agree to do that. So we often have used an interest-based approach, and often when the proposals will come across the table, beginning to ask those questions of why, and let's kind of walk through and see if we can understand what the underlying issue is. So even if there's not a actual interest-based bargaining process going on, using those tools have been really helpful, and Buzz has taught us how to do that well.
So I have a question on that. So when there is interest-based bargaining, how does that work vis-a-vis the outside pressures from other districts? So it tends to become a percentage of, bargaining tool. Basically, well, this district is getting this, so how do you then keep asking the whys when this is the only issue that's unfolding?
So what you do have to understand on that is, why are they looking at those other districts and what their salaries are? Why do they look at the percentages? And you really have to deeply understand there is a why behind it. It's not just a tool for them to get to something. There's a reason they're doing it. And often we'll come back what the interest underlying that is we want to have competitive salaries that attract and retain the employees in our positions. So it's nice when you can identify an interest like that, because interests are much easier to reach an agreement on. Because if a union says that, we want you to be, because the district next door got a 10% raise, we want a 10% raise, and I ask them why, and it's because we don't want to lose any of our teachers to that district, because we want to attract new teachers to come to our district. That's attract and retain. I can buy into that. I want to attract and retain too. I don't want to lose all my teachers. I want to attract new teachers here. We can agree on attract and retain. So let's write that down. That's the goal, attract and retain. One way to do that is to make sure we have competitive salaries. Oh, what does competitive mean? Let's start defining what competitive salaries mean. Does it mean at year 30 we have the highest salary in the area? Does it mean at year 1 we have the highest salary? And you can start asking questions and start talking about that. We often use comparables. I use comparables a lot. It's actually what I spent my holiday period doing the last couple of weeks, was creating a database of 60 school district salary charts. And I did that because I'm using comparables as an external standard. Because oftentimes one of the other interests is fair. We want a fair salary. I want to be treated fairly. I don't want to be expected to do the same thing as a teacher in Renton, but only paid half of what that teacher in Renton gets paid. I want to be treated fairly. Well, what does fair mean? Fair is a hard thing to define. One way to define fair is let's find an external standard. Maybe the standard is, what's the market? What's the market for a 10-year teacher with 10 years of experience and a master's degree? What is that market look like? And the only way you're going to find that is by checking out. And sometimes it's not what you find through that process, a percentage increase. You know, they got a 10%, I'd have a 10%. It might be, I actually need 12% to get to where their salary is at only 10%. So percentages aren't always the best way to look at that. I might need to give more to be able to have a competitive salary, or I might need to give less. It could be that with only 8%, I can still be ahead of that district next door at year 10 for master's degree. So that's what we often will do to try to deal with that pressure from around us. We have to accept it. We have to accept there's a why they're looking at that. And it usually is because there's a market pressure. They want to be competitive, they want to attract and retain, and they want to be treated fairly. And I lean into it. I try to use what's going on in other districts to help us find an external standard. Now, it's tough, because if, everybody around us was going into bankruptcy as school districts, I don't know that they're the best examples of salaries we ought to use, perhaps. And so you have to be careful about tying your contract to a bunch of other districts if they're not doing a rational thing. But if you can tie it to a large enough group and have some trust that, gee, these 10 districts aren't all going to be doing the wrong thing, perhaps you can come up with an external standard that you can use. And a couple of places, that's how we've reached an agreement. So in 2019, which is in the year after the big salary raises that most districts got, I had very few districts open, but one that was open that wasn't open the year before. They did just a quick little, we call it a Band-Aid approach, and then they came back in 2019 and bargained. And what we did is we spent probably 2 days just talking about who's the right comparison for their district. They're a smaller district of about 1,500 students, but they're in King County, and so they're surrounded by a lot of larger districts. How do they decide what's a fair salary for that district when you don't have the same resources others do, but you're still competing against them for teachers? So we spent probably 2 full days just trying to talk about what would be the standards for deciding how do we define what's fair. And I'm very proud that they did. They came up with a definition. We wrote it down in the contract so we can use it next time as well. This is how we're going to define what is a fair comparison for us to come up with what our salaries are going to be. And once we reach there, after a lot of discussion, over 2 days of discussion, we reach an agreement. The parties can then be very creative with, okay, we've decided this is what fair is. How are we going to use that money to do that in our district? And it became a very positive outcome. So it can be done even with those comparison games going on. It's tough.
Do you have any background in how the culture throughout the year before you go into contracts can reflect how the bargaining is perhaps going to proceed?
Yeah. I have a lot of experience. I'll tell you most of that is not from a legal, I can tell you the law says yes or no about this, but it's in strategy and bargaining philosophy. One of the bargaining philosophies we talk about is the bargaining is actually year-round every year. You never stop bargaining. That's the idea. And it's not that you never stop, you never want to be sitting at the bargaining table rebargaining your labor contract every year, but it is the concept that the way that you are treating one another in a relationship is much more important than those times when you're actually writing the contract. The relationship, I find, this is one of the lessons I teach, now we're going off into my philosophy speech, but relationships are much more effective in long-term change than contracts are. The contract can be a good foundation for a relationship, and you want to have a good, strong foundation for your house, but you live in the house. You don't live in the foundation. You live in the relationship. That's where, particularly when I talk about organizational change, is where it occurs. It occurs in the relationship, not in the contract language. Doesn't mean I'm going to give away contract language because I don't care about it. I do. I care about contract language. But I don't want us to lose sight that the relationship is where I think most of organizational leadership happens.
I appreciate that very much. I think we're going to have to conclude. It's at 6:30. I really appreciate you coming. I apologize for being a little late in traffic, but it's very enlightening. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay. Apparently we're recessing and going into executive executive session in the other room. All righty. My first gavel.
Yeah, this has to go. Well, let's take it a chip.
Are we making another roll? Another row?
Yeah. You'll remove this, I'm going to remove the table. So there will be a lot of people. So this. Get the chairs.
State surveys did have. Hey, Don. Yep. I knew it was in the survey. So I appreciate you calling.
Every other one.
Seven there, do you want? Okay. Yeah, that's all the numbers.
Did you get one of our kids last year? Roughly. So we're saying employees last year. It's about an active check. 9%. It's the same with CrossFit. Have you heard so far? All, I use 3,700. To 9%. It's an hour for CrossFit. I'm sure I have the numbers from the and 8%. And that's for 7 months. It's not even sweeter because this is, I have this data for the Title II report and for the year-end report. So this isn't, it'll be higher because of the year. Which,
No, that's how many should be.
Oh, that's not the
I'm trying to, I'm a little bit positive.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my mind wants to say, I'm just out in the fire. Yeah, that's awesome. But, there's just, so. Just in case. And as you see,
Well, I know, but what I'm saying is.
yes. Okay, so we'll go back by. They said.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I have an export.
and then Christy cleaned it up. So still not fixed.
Oh, I put them right here, sorry. Yeah, no, he just said no.
You guys decide you want somewhere else. If you don't do it together, you both are on call. If the other one is out or something like sick.
Alright, I'll call her tomorrow, see what we want to do.
Because we had a situation where somebody sent somebody else home and they got sick. Somebody else told me that there might be.
I wasn't sure, I mean, I blocked it on my calendar, because now you give me the invites and that's what's happening. You don't have to use this one. You said you had the one.
There's a 1.5 or something to somebody's name of the day, but then there's Scott sent a person, and then somebody else told me today, somebody hired someone, but the paperwork hasn't gone through yet, and somebody else is starting to hire someone, so there's a might be. I don't know.
All right, I'll talk to Rosa, we'll figure it out.
We were in so much scoring all day today. Yeah, it was nice, and they did a nice job. And asked good questions. Yeah, it was good.
Thank you.
Where everyone wants to.
Always something different.
Would like to enjoy the day and learning more about the big picture.
Feels weird that I'm introduced someone on
But there is some urgency.
My name's on there, but just
There was official introduction of girl, and I didn't copy Tracy because I blind.
My name's on it, but I
If I copy them, they're not gonna know.
Let me answer that. So I'll make sure that.
No one can beat them.
I'm in other classes. So that was the first. I'm still checking to find one. We've got to find one. I think we can say, I think we can apply it for. I know Horizon's got one, so we got that. And I'm trying to find another one. So if we could just even take a course on I've only heard about it from politics. What's your deal?
Mike, nice to meet you too. Hello, sir. How you doing? I'm good. How you doing? Good. So, it's been probably 50 years since there's been 4 of us.
So the question is, how long will it be to the next 4 years?
No more than 10 minutes. All right, because that's what I'm reaching about. Okay. I'm ready for and real estate companies to go. Anybody else look like you?
On the building. I said, tell me one. We're currently in Meeker and Meridian Middle School. We've offered going to the elementary school. We're in Bryn Mawr, Campbell Hill.
Oh, really?
That's right, yes, sir.
Okay, all right.
But then also we do get on the move work with all of the high school.
You probably know. All right, so I tell you, you said, so I say you say right away. So yeah, we don't wait for ever since he came out here, it's great. Yeah, so, issues. There's always good. So now we know.
Yes, sir.
Nice meeting you.
It's nice to meet you. Thank you.
All right.
Like all the media.
It can. So presentation usually
You are, I'm sorry, Leslie's here, you're here. Yep.
You want the corner?
Can you sign this before we start? Okay. Down, please?
Thank you.
Everyone's gravitating to the non. I'm sorry. That was for us. That'll be good for us to be able to chat.
The one that you have to sign, did you pass that down? Okay, thanks.
Sure. Thank you. It's 7:05, and I'm calling the January 8th, 2020 School Board General Meeting to order. I would like to ask, how about Kendrick, how would you like to lead us in the flag salute tonight?
By all means.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome. Good to see all you tonight. This is a meeting of the Kent School District Board, which is held in the public to comply, with the Open Public Meetings Act. Process for the audience participation. As you noted, there's a table back there with cards, and bring them up here front as soon as you can fill them out, so we have them, so you can participate in public comment. The purpose of the board meeting is for the board to conduct its business in public. During the meeting, the board will listen to but not respond to comments from visitors. Those wishing to comment must complete a comment card, like I said, in the back, and give it to the board secretary, which is right down here on the end, before the meeting begins, or no later than, please hear this so everybody understands, agenda number 5.0. So bring it up before 5.0. No cards will be accepted once presentations have begun. Abusive public comments personally directed towards staff members will not be tolerated. The president may interrupt or terminate an individual statement when it is too lengthy, obscene, or irrelevant. When it is your turn to address the board, please state your name at the start of your testimony. Please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. You will hear a timer when 3 minutes are up. Visitors who have completed a comment card indicating a desire to speak to an agenda item will be called at that portion of the agenda. Per board procedure, written material to provide board members with background information should be submitted to the superintendent's office at least 1 week in advance of the meeting. All righty, agenda review. President Hamada, myself, will ask Dr. Watts if there's any changes to the agenda. Dr. Watts.
Yes, President Tamada, please note that a supplemental personnel report has been added to the consent agenda.
I would like to ask a board member to make a motion to approve our consent agenda.
I so move that we amend the consent agenda as stated.
Is there a second?
I second.
It has been moved and seconded. A motion has been made to approve the consent agenda with the adjustments made. All those in favor will signify by raising their right hand. As to yes, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Moving on to 2.0, our superintendent's report. Dr. Watts.
Yes, thank you, President Hamada, members of the board, Ms. Holly, staff, and friends. I would like to bring a focus, first of all, as we welcome each and every one to 2020. Our vision in Kent School District is clearer now. Happy New Year, welcome back. At the same time, we are reminded this evening that our focus is squarely and solely remain on our students' improved and increased academic performance, social emotional growth, and to ensure that they're prepared for their futures. I would like to pay tribute based on the state of our schools. Now, there are 43 facilities, 42 schools that provide support, teaching, and learning each and every day. And here are just a few of the great work that is taking place based on our building administrators, our teachers, our paraeducators, office managers, support staff, and our families. And yes, most importantly, we could not do this work without our students. Living out our core values, first among equals, is equity. I would like to pay tribute first to Kent Lake High School, who has done some strategic work around restorative practices. That is, taking a different approach to discipline and ensuring that the restorative of restorative practices means that we work towards restoring relationships when those relationships are damaged or hurt in any way. They've restructured the in-school suspension to a behavior academic support room, and they are focusing more on intervention rather than consequences. At Kent Meridian High School, they're partnering with Community Network Council, otherwise known as CNC, community-based organization, to provide academic coaching and mentoring for approximately 40 students who happen to be African American. We also collaborated, or Kent Meridian has collaborated with CNC on professional development for staff, for culturally responsive practices. December 18th, staff meeting, for example, they hosted CNC in a panel of 10 students and community members who happen to be African American to discuss the varied experiences with school and with educators. Cedar Valley, they're very proud of their work and a team that they refer to as the HOPE team. The HOPE team accepts referrals from teachers and also uses data to identify our students and our academic scholars that seem to be in need of support and academic interventions. Kent Ridge High School, they have been deeply and entrenched in professional development through culturally responsive practices, through Zaretta Hammond's work, and working on social emotional education with all of our students using what is referred to as Character Strong program by John Norland. From an equity standpoint, our goal is to address the needs of each and every, to make sure that our students and our staff have what they need when they need it. Excellence is our second core value at Martin Sortoon. They are continuing their work, groundbreaking work with whole brain teaching, student engagement practices that specifically focuses on improved handwriting, strategies that support improved content writing. What we know about literacy, and as a former English teacher and English major, it's important for our students to be able to read. But just because they know how to read doesn't mean that they know how to write. If we focus on writing, in order to write well, all students must be able to read, and that is a primary focus on what's happening at Martin Sortoon. Kent Elementary School, some notable progress includes efforts from the 4th grade team, in which all truly means all. From some of our interim assessments, our fourth grade students at Kent Elementary are performing at 102% of their annual typical growth. That's more than 1 year's average growth in reading. Third grade students, 94% annual typical growth in reading, and their sixth grade students average 97% annual growth in mathematics. Ridgewood Elementary School celebrates the fact that they are continuing to work on teaching and assessing writing across the curriculum in K through 6. And I will add that our third among equal, community. If you look around, you see we are well represented this evening by a richly diverse community, and Panther Lake Elementary School has done quite a bit of outreach to our community within their school surroundings. They were able to provide 11 holiday meals at Thanksgiving and 12 holiday baskets as well for 20 students who were in need during this holiday season. And finally, Sunrise Elementary, creating opportunities to spotlight nonprofit organizations and programs that could use some volunteers, and those volunteers actually came from within. They created space and time for volunteers, including Sunrise families, to provide toys for students and families, even partnering with the fire department on Wednesday to eat lunch with the Winning Classroom and to support the ever-changing needs of our community. Our continued focus, ladies and gentlemen, centers around the question, what is not, and given new information, what should be done in the best interest of each and every student. When we do that well, we then identify, we train, and we develop the adults who support our students in our schools and our central administration buildings. We thank our teachers, we thank our support staff, we thank our building administrators, and today especially we thank our newly elected and our veteran school board directors who provide that support and that continued centered focus on our students. President Hamada, that concludes my report. I will turn it back to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Watts. We're now on to 3.01, our proclamations, and 3.01 is the School Board Recognition Month, and who is reading that tonight? Okay. Dr. Watts is going to read that, if you would, please.
I will. Whereas the mission of Washington's public school system is to assure that all students achieve at high levels and possess the knowledge and skills to be responsible citizens of a democratic society who enjoy productive and satisfying lives, and whereas Washington's 295 locally elected school boards and 9 elected educational service district boards are the core of the public education governance system in our state, and whereas the districts and regions they lead serve more than 1 million students, have a combined annual budget of over $15 billion with a B dollars, and employ approximately 120,000 people, and whereas school directors play a crucial role in promoting student learning and achievement by creating a vision, establishing policies and budgets, and setting clear standards of accountability for all involved. And whereas school directors are directly accountable to the citizens in their districts and regions, serving as a vital link between members of the community and their schools. And whereas school directors and educational service districts provide a passionate voice of advocacy for public schools and the welfare of school children. And whereas it is appropriate to recognize school directors as outstanding volunteers and champions for public education. Now, therefore, I, Jay Inslee, Governor of the State of Washington, do hereby proclaim January 2020 as School Board Recognition Month in Washington, and I encourage all people in our state to join me in this special observance. Signed by Governor Jay Inslee.
And just a note here that all those being recognized, if you would please stay until the end of the recognition for a photo opportunity. Superintendent Watts, you're going to be introducing Dr. Christine Avery?
Yes. You just did a great job for me. I appreciate that. Dr. Avery, will you please come to the podium for
Yes, good evening to the school board and Dr. Watts, and Happy New Year and Happy School Board Recognition Month. I'd like to bring to your attention some of the posters made for you from Kent Ridge High School on that side of the room, and over here we have Kent Meridian High School, and a lovely canvas sign for you made by Ridgewood Elementary. And next, I hope you enjoy this video made for you by the students at Scenic Hill in their dual language program.
Hoy es un día mejor, el cielo tiene color. En el aire se respira el amor, hay una nueva ilusión que llena mi corazón. En mi mundo se ha borrado el temor, te entrego en esta canción las palabras de mi corazón. Hoy quiero darte las gracias por darme esperanza, poder caminar junto a ti, por ayudar con el aula y darme confianza. Y haces cosas para verme feliz, ¿qué más te puedo decir? Hoy puedo soñar y reír. Gracias a ti, a ti, a ti. Gracias a ti, a ti, a ti. Gracias a ti, a ti, a ti. Gracias a ti.
Thank you for all the food from the district. I guess we're gonna eat all this. It's delicious food.
Thank you. Gracias por mis libros. Gracias por los materiales. Thank you for my school. Thank you for my beautiful teachers. Gracias por la comida. Gracias por el transporte. Thanks for your attention. Gracias por los autobuses. Getting everything for us to be successful.
Gracias por darnos educación en nuestra escuela y gracias por esforzarse para que tengamos mucho éxito.
Gracias. Gracias a ti, a ti, a ti. Gracias a ti, a ti, a ti. Gracias a ti, a ti, a ti. Gracias a ti.
Next, to celebrate you this evening, I would like to introduce the principal from Northwood Middle School, Sherry Lynn Ulland.
Thank you, School Board. In appreciation of our school board, I would like to introduce to you the Northwood Choir. I want to start while they are kind of getting set up, talk to you a little bit about our music program and specifically our choir director, Mr. Jeffrey Gordon. I think it's important to kind of introduce him a little bit. Mr. Gordon was a choir teacher at Lake Young's elementary school for several years, and he really built a strong choir program at Lake Young's. And I heard some rumors about his great work, and we were having a little bit of troubles building our choir program. And as you know, when our numbers are not there, we struggled with these difficult decisions on whether to continue with our programs or if we have to cut the music classes. Fortunately, we were able to hire Mr. Gordon, and his reputation preceded him. We had about 18 students sign up that year. By the time the year started and by mid-year, we had over 50 students in our choir. And so these are our choir students. And the second year that Mr. Gordon was with us, he took an opportunity that was very excited to take. He currently is the music director now at Kent Ridge High School and Northwood. So Lake Young's didn't get the opportunity to have him this year, but he stays connected with the elementary schools, and this December he hosted at Northwood a choir program, winter program, in which he had all the feeder elementary school choirs come to Northwood along with the Northwood choir, and they performed. There must have been over 300 students and parents there performing for for everybody, and just kind of promoting the music programs within our strands and in our community. So I'm very proud to introduce to you Mr. Jeffrey Gordon and the Northwood Choir in appreciation of our board.
I'm going to talk now, and then I won't talk between the songs so we can get all of our music into our time slot, because I talk a lot. But we are so excited to be here to share some music with you. We have 4 selections for you. A couple of them are just kind of for fun. We just like singing them. We thought you'd enjoy them. Some of them have some kind of special messages lined underneath for the community and for the time of year, so we hope you kind of pick up on those. Thank you again for the opportunity to perform. Will you let me know if the piano's too loud? I didn't do a sound check. That's that hard one.
Thank you.
Okay, we can all go home now, right? That's all we need is peace and love, and faith and all that stuff. Thank you very much, Dr. Avery and Scenic Hill and Norwood, the choir students and the director. It was greatly appreciated. It just brings my heart to hear those kind of words, especially tonight with what's going on in our country. Thank you very much. And let's see, we have somebody, I believe, that wants to speak to 3.01, and that is Charlotte Schindler. Pardon me?
704, I didn't put a number, sorry.
Oh, I thought you had said 3.01. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm learning, okay, folks? I'm learning. Okay. All right, we'll continue on. We have another proclamation, 3.02. And I'm going to call on Denise, you're going to read that? Director Daniels is going to read the proclamation for the National Mentoring Month.
Whereas the Kent School District recognizes that its success depends on ensuring all students succeed in school and reach their full potential in life, and realizes that students need a solid foundation of support that will help them become well-educated, confident, and productive citizens, and whereas mentoring is a proven, effective strategy that helps students by matching them with a caring, responsible adult who can provide guidance and direction and build their confidence. Whereas research shows that mentoring has a beneficial and long-term effects for students by increasing their chances of high school graduation and college attendance and decreasing the likelihood of substance abuse and other risky behaviors. And whereas mentoring strengthens our community's economic and social well-being by helping students fulfill their potential while helping maintain healthy families and promoting more vibrant communities. And whereas National Mentoring Month is an opportunity to raise public awareness of the importance of mentoring, recognizing the dedicated individuals who serve as mentors, and encourage more citizens to help build a brighter future for Kent's youth through mentoring. Now therefore be it resolved that the Kent School District Board of Directors proclaim January 2020 as National Mentoring Month and urge all citizens to recognize the importance of mentoring, to look for opportunities to serve as mentors in their communities.
I would like to invite Mr. Kendrick Glover to come forward to accept the National Mentoring Month proclamation.
I'll keep it brief because we have a presentation. I just want to say thank you for this recognition. It does not go unnoted, and thank you to the team and of Jim for standing beside us in this work, and thank you for allowing us to be here.
Okay, we're going to go to take some photos now. I got so much press. I got to take it there. Yeah, that'd be good. We're now going to move on to 4.0, the public hearing. And
I can introduce it.
oh, okay, got it. All right.
We'll call Dr. Jewel Harmon, Chief Accountability Officer, to begin the process for a public hearing. Thank you, Dr. Harmon.
Good evening, Dr. Watts. I'm sorry. Good evening, President Hamada, members of the board, Dr. Watts, Ms. Hawley. It's a little bit different this evening, and as the first meeting of the year, and it being School Board Director Recognition Month, I'd like to say thank you for all you do, and it's humbling to be standing here saying that to such a diverse group of all-female board directors. That does not happen often, and it is not lost on me saying that. As a third person saying it this evening, I was like, okay. Also, thank you for all we have to accomplish and all you will do this year. 4.01 is about the public hearing related to agenda item 6.01, and it's the resolution for the board to collectively endorse our levy. As a point of clarification, this is a redo of our December agenda items so that it was expressly clear to our public what was to be discussed, what the intent of that was, so there's no misunderstanding. This is not about whether or not the board and the school district will run a levy. That was voted on in October. This is about the endorsement by the board, and so I'm going to step back and allow that public hearing space to happen.
Does anyone wish to address this issue in the room? Please come forward.
I wasn't sure if I had to put in a card for this particular one. Alan Sutliff, community member, and full disclosure, I work with the Kent Education Association, but I'm not the spokesperson for the Kent Education Association. I'm speaking as a community member and as a parent, and I'm glad I was able to make it to the board meeting this month. This was wonderful. This was absolutely wonderful. This is why we have levies, because the state still doesn't fund this part of education. This is exactly why we have levies. And so please support this levy. I know I have supported every levy since I've lived in Kent, and I will continue to do so, even though my last child is graduating this year. So I will continue to do that. So I appreciate working alongside of you to get a levy passed. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that wishes to come to the podium? No other questions? No other speakers? Can we now close that part, okay. All right, we're gaveling out of that part of our meeting tonight. And we're moving on to presentations, 5.01, Glover Empower Mentoring, GEM presentation by Mr. Kendrick Glover. And he will give a presentation, and he's going to be available for questions.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for having us. My name is Kendrick Glover. I serve as the Executive Director of Glover Empower Mentoring. Here with me to my immediate left, I have our Program Organizational Manager, Mr. Jamil Myers, and our Case Manager, Mr. Michael Jones. Thank you, Board. Thank you, Madam Board President, Superintendent, and the Board for having us this evening. So I just click, okay. So in 2014, Glover Empower Mentoring was founded as a way to give back to the youth and young adults in the city of Kent. Our mission, to inform, interact, and inspire youth and young adults through effective mentoring and case management. Our vision, through holistic mentoring and case management, every youth and young adult is empowered to be principled, responsible, critical thinkers who affect positive change in their community. Our pillars of GEM: education, employment, and healthy relationship building. GEM currently operates 15 programs. However, we only have time to highlight the programs that we facilitate in KSD in the city of Kent. The board has been given the GEM portfolio, which includes the 15 programs in their respective bodies of work. So they should be in front of you. Our flagship program is our community mentoring program, which is hosted at Kent Phoenix Academy on Wednesday evenings. GEM hosts and facilitate weekly community mentoring sessions to young adults within the community. These groups sessions focus on local and national topics, poll topics through mentors and mentees, mental health, and education. The goal is to start relevant conversations that youth will take back into their school, home, and community to continue the conversation and spark change. Our services include one-on-one mentoring, in-school mentoring, referral to other services, and community service hours. Within the city of Kent, our partnership has bolstered what we like to call our Kent Police Department Diversion Program. GEM is a leader in restorative justice practices and builds capacity in the city of Kent to foster youth empowerment and divert them from criminal justice involvement into positive pathways of education, employment, and healthy relationships. Within the Kent School District, our first program that we implemented back in 2014 at Meridian Middle School was our GEM After School program. The GAP program focuses on social-emotional aspects of the school process. It gives the youth participants an opportunity to look at the issues that they deal with within school from a new perspective and humanize the staff at the school. With a GEM staff member present twice weekly, youth develop a functioning relationship with an adult who helps establish trust. Our program is also at Meeker Middle School as well for the last 4 years. One of our newly programs that GEM has, I wouldn't want to say acquired, but one of the programs that we now lead through the relationship we have with KSD is our Men/Women on the Move program. This program was instituted to create a space for student voice to help lead school and district improvement. Students of color are currently impacted disproportionately by high discipline rates, lower graduation, and underrepresentation in advanced courses. Men and Women on the Move is designed to empower students who have been historically underserved to work with district and their school staff to support their needs for academic and social-emotional growth, all while maintaining the respect and understanding for all. The services include in-school mentoring and referral to outside services. I'll bring up Mr. Jamil Myers to talk about our in-school programs that we're currently operating.
Good evening, everyone. Our two latest programs that we have developed are our Roots program and our BURP program. Both were developed around trauma-informed care and restorative justice practices. The GEM team teaches a unique curriculum around social-emotional learning, mentoring, healthy coping strategies, emotional and behavioral self-regulation skills, advocacy and problem-solving techniques, providing a pathway to achieve success. It is accomplished by creating a safe environment for varied life experiences, student voices, and the cultures to be heard and supported, all to inspire youth to discover their full potential. By allowing students to openly discuss and share their personal understanding of their individual life experiences, it promotes a common understanding among all students. Services include educational programming, in-school mentoring, restorative justice practices, and referral to other services. Our BERT program, which is our Behavioral Intervention and Restorative Practices program, the GYM team provides an opportunity for a reduction in suspension time to students with long-term suspensions lasting a minimum of 10 days. GYM uses the understanding of the ABC model, which is attendance, behavior, and course performance, as a guide for our student success. Youth enrolled in this program will be given a chance to look at the behaviors that resulted in his or her suspension. By focusing on the root cause of the behavior and identifying goals, this will improve all relationships. Coursework approved by the Kent School District will be accessible for students to complete math, science, and language arts while they are not present on the campus. This completes our presentation. At this time, we will open the floor for all questions.
We'll start with Director Bowman. Do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions, no, but I think this is great. I'm really glad that you guys are doing this for the kids in the community.
Thank you.
So I don't have one of those little things, but that's okay. So you said you're at Meeker. I'll look at. I'm sure it's here somewhere.
Okay.
So you said you're at Meeker. What other schools are you at right now, besides Meeker?
Currently, for our Roots program, which is the here, removing obstacles to overcome trauma in schools. We are partnered with both Meeker Middle School and Meridian Middle School, and where we have 2 classes at Meeker Middle School, second and third period, and we also have 1 class at Meridian Middle School, which is second period, but next semester we will go into third and fourth period at Meridian Middle School, sorry.
Thank you.
Well, I wanted to thank you, Kendrick, so much for coming. When we were setting the agenda, I really wanted to have you all here because your meetings are on Wednesdays, and I think I've known you for 10 years. We haven't been able to make any of the meetings, so it's so nice to hear about how vast your program is over the years. I remember our discussions, I think 10 years ago, and how far you've come. It's wonderful to see. We thank you, and I especially am happy to hear about Women on the Move. I know Director DeBruler really pushed for that, and I'm sure she'll be happy to hear that as well. And thank you for all you're doing for our community.
Thank you.
Yeah, I truly think it's amazing and support your work. And I appreciate a quote that you have in here, and I've heard it and used it several times. It's, I have to see me to be me. And our kids, in particular our kids of color, don't often see positive role models in areas of leadership in other places. And so I wish you could be in every school providing that, because it's good for all kids to see. But in particular, I do believe it's really powerful for our young people of color to see people that look like them in positions of leadership and supporting and giving back to the community, because it's really important. Our stories are important, and what we share is important. And so I totally appreciate and salute you for all you do. And so I hope we can grow the program and continue to expand and touch as many kids as possible. So thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you, Director Daniels. But I want to just clarify that the quote, I have to see me in order, I have to see me in order to be me is not, I didn't coin that phrase. I actually borrowed that from Dr. Watts, because every time I meet him, he always tell me that quote, and it's just so inspiring and uplifting that I always tell my young people, and I always give credit where credit is due. So I would never not say where I got it from. I don't know where you received it from. So yeah, my mentor.
And I'm just going to piggyback on that. I've known you for a long time. I've had the pleasure to come to some of the events we've done, and we've been there advocating for kids, both of us in different ways and different methods. But this work is really important work, and I can't tell you how much of a difference it is to see the 3 of you in front of them, as opposed to maybe somebody like me. I really appreciate that. And I hope to see more of you in the future. Your growth in how you interacted in the community has grown. I've watched that, and that's in itself, that's a goal there. Thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do we have anyone that wishes to speak to Agenda 5.0? Is that one? No, I think we're okay. I have conferred here, and I think we're okay. All righty. We'll move on. All right. We're on to Board of Directors discussion and approval of Resolution 6.01, Resolution number 1573, endorsement of Proposition number 1, Kent School District number 415, replacement of expiring educational programs and operational levy. I would like to entertain a motion from a board member regarding the support or endorsement of this measure.
So I move that we endorse and support Resolution number 1573, Proposition number 1, Kent School District number 415, replacement of expiring educational programs and operations levy.
I second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve the endorsement resolution number 1573, endorsement of Proposition number 1, Kent School District number 415, replacement of expiring educational programs and operational level. Is there discussion and questions?
Yeah, I have some questions. I just want clarity around what the levy dollars will be spent on. I've read all the materials on the website. So my first question is, will levy dollars be used to increase any of these areas that are on the website, the student safety and school security, career readiness, bullying prevention, educational support for students with special needs, daily operations to support clean and healthy and well-maintained schools, professional development, essential staff? Is that increases to those, or is that just maintaining what we currently have?
It actually is an increase. I won't get into the nerd fest and math of talking about all of that, although it excites me. But because of the rate that we're asking for from our community, it is actually an increase in programmatic value. If we were sustaining what we were doing right now in current state, it would be a lower rate, around $1.71 per thousand assessed value. And so that increased rate does offer some capacity to expand program supports. Although we haven't gotten into the deep budget of dividing out exactly where those dollars will go, that is part discussion with our board around development of budget. So there's not a concrete plan for those dollars, but it does represent an increase in programmatic support.
Okay, and I think, I've heard constituents say that they have concerns with the way the last levy dollars were spent and the fallout after the last levy. So, we all know the levy passed, but then there were cuts. So if this levy passes, which we hope it will, to support things like this choir, are there any proposed cuts if this levy passes?
So we haven't started working on budget yet, but we don't have any proposed cuts as of right now. We are in a great financial position compared to where we were when we ran the last levy. And in the conversations that I've had informationally with constituents, community, and staff about this, that question has actually come up about the levy, the state that we were in, and the conversation and answer that I gave and will give to you as a board member, again, is thinking about where we were financially then and what was happening. We had just found out about our deficit as a district. I had not been long in the district myself, and we hit this position, and then we're in another position to go back and ask our community for support. The support that we asked for was to sustain status quo. The problem is our status quo at that time was a negative fund balance. So what we asked for didn't give us any dollars or capacity to fill a hole at that point in time. All it allowed us to do was keep a ship running at a negative state. So those cuts were not necessarily related to the levy in those plans. It was about the state of having a negative fund balance. At the time of running a levy, if we wanted to close that gap, we should have asked for higher amounts of dollars, which would not necessarily have been legal given some other states of how the laws changed around what we were allowed to ask our taxpayers. So fast forward 2.5 years, we're in a different financial space as a district in terms of fund balance. We're in a different financial space in terms of what we're allowed to collect. We're in a different financial space with where we are and being able to expand programs and do some things as well. So there aren't any plans to cut anything. In fact, the dollar amount we've asked for is an increase so that we can expand. Because what we've heard from our board, from our public, and what we believe as staff is that the state isn't funding everything that we'd like to do and need to do. And this would allow us the space to do that.
I'm just concerned about a repeat of what happened after the last levy passed. And I'm, concerned. I know teachers are worried. And I know constituents are saying they don't want to vote for a levy with leadership the way it is. So it's that balancing act. So thank you.
Any other questions, discussion? I'd just like to add to going to a lot of the community meetings, it appears that our community really wants music and the arts back in. So just to clarify, do I hear you saying that there's a very good possibility, which I think I understand from some of the meetings I've gone to, that we are going to be able to have a little more wiggle room to give that to our public?
So from a financial perspective, I believe so. Oddly enough, as a staff member, we develop a plan for budget for the district, and then we have those conversations with our board. So ironically, a little bit, our work session was about parameters from our board related to bargaining. We will engage very soon in a different conversation about parameters, expectations, core beliefs, and values of the board as it relates to budget. And that will help set the tone for us and what you all see for an FY21 budget that relates to the expenditures of these levy. So hopeful levy dollars. So what I will say is that where those levy dollars are spent is as much in your hands as it is in ours. But there's definitely the financial possibility and space for that.
I think that's one of the things I've really, really heard of, and I think it's really helpful in building forward a real strong trust in our district. If we can meet those expectations and really demonstrate that. And I understand we're in the process of our fiscal task force is putting together some dashboards to really monitor those different items that are going to be happening. I'm excited to see that happening, because a lot of this stuff, when you look at this budget, it's hard to read. And my goal is that, because I think I've gone through it enough that I have some of an understanding of it, but I want everybody in this community to understand exactly where their dollars are going. So I've worked on so many propositions and levies that it's really hard when you take that into consideration, because there's a lot of people that really struggle to pay these taxes anymore. And I just think we really have to be over cautious and over demonstrating what we're doing with that money constantly, and have it out there so we get it down to a simplistic thing so everybody can understand where their dollars are going. I think that more than anything is going to have them want to step up and pass and be supportive of our district and of this levy. So thank you. Any other questions? Is everybody clear and need any more clarification or anything? Are we ready to take a vote? Do we need a minute? Or? Okay. I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor, say aye by raising your right hand.
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries. Those opposed? Abstentions? I didn't see that. Did we all raise our, it was unanimous. Okay, thank you very much. I can't see clear down there, so I need clarification, okay? All right, the motion passes.
Yeah.
All right, on to 6.02, inclusive education out of the district change order. I would like to ask a board member to make a motion.
I move that we approve agenda item 6.02, inclusive education out of district change order number 2.
I second the motion.
Okay. It has been moved and seconded for the inclusive education out of district change order number 2. Are there any discussion regarding this or questions? Does everybody understand this? Need a moment?
Again, when we talk about budget, I would like to see a place where we're not having to send children out of the district, and for both this 6.02 and 6.03. So what steps are being taken to try and keep children in the district?
Okay. Good evening, Board, President Hamada, Dr. Watts, directors. I want to introduce members of our inclusive education leadership team, Mike Williams, who's serving as our interim director, and John Robinson, who's back there, who's our assistant director in inclusive ed, and they'll be able to respond to your questions.
Good evening, Board. In response to the question, Ms. Bittinger, I believe it was, what are we doing to keep students here in Kent? Everything we can, quite honestly. That's why I'm here, to be perfectly honest. Our goal is to serve students within the programs that we have available. When we're not able to do that, unfortunately, that does happen at times, and we need to seek outside services.
And it's important to note that a part of the placement process is that's decided by the IEP team. So they really look at what are the needs of the students, what is our capacity within our building and with the resources that we have to be able to meet those needs. And they make a decision based on what will be best for the student. And a part of that discussion includes the parents and family.
Any other discussions? Everybody clear? Any more discussion? Are we ready to take a vote? All right. All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand and saying aye.
Aye.
Those, well, it looks like it was unanimous again, so don't have to go through that. The motion passes. On to 6.03.
Just a quick point of clarification. Even if it's a unanimous, go ahead and take the no votes just for the clarity of the record.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
I need
you.
some help
Yep.
with that. Thank you.
Doing great.
Just speak up anytime. I make mistakes all the time. Thank you. All righty. Okay. Do I actually need to do that right now? You want me to really make a fool out of it? Okay. All those opposed? All those, any abstentions? We are official. The motion carries. Okay. On to 6.03. Inclusive education out of district placement, Intermountain residential. I would like to entertain a motion in regard to this.
I move that we approve 6.03, inclusive education out of district placement, Intermountain residential.
I'll second.
It has been moved and seconded to place inclusive education out of district placement, Intermountain residential. Do we have any discussion or questions regarding this?
Yeah, I have a few questions. So I'm kind of a little confused about what's going to be going on here. I mean, it's not like the first one where they're just going to be going out of district, because when I looked at the website, I noticed that Intermountain is in Montana.
Yes.
So I just want to clarify, is the student going to be sent to the facility in Montana?
Yes.
They are?
Yes.
Okay. And is that the only way that we work with them? Because I noticed they work with 3 states, but I wasn't sure if that was like a back and forth or just us sending students to them.
Yeah, without getting into too many specific details about the student specifically,
Yeah.
the services that are required require residential services, and that is where the service is in closest proximity to where we are. We don't offer residential services in Washington, and it would be the most appropriate program to meet the students' needs at that location in Montana. Cost is also a consideration as well as location.
so that the location and the needs needing to be met by the student and the cost is what you guys kind of looked at in relation to where you would suggest to send them.
Yes, when the team makes those decisions, we look at the NPA list provided by OSPI, the non-public agency list. Intermountain Academy or facility was once approved. We didn't have Washington students in there for a period of time. The renewal process is yearly, so since we haven't had a student from Washington attending that recently, it needed to be reapproved. So it was reapproved for NPA status through OSPI, and now we are able to send a student there. You're welcome.
Do you have, I mean, we haven't sent a student there, so you're just going by what your best practices that you're reading about, and we don't actually know anybody that's in the area that's gone through their program, other school districts or anything?
There have been students in the past. Again, the NPA list through OSPI are sites that are vetted and go through an approval process, need to have districts as a sponsor. We are required to do site visits yearly and renew that NPA status. So there is some research into the facility, the services they provide, if they meet the requirements of Washington State. This facility has been vetted in the past, and therefore we would utilize them if they were able to meet the specific needs of the student, which they are.
And I'm just curious, because I've never really had to go through this process, but are parents and the student themselves, if they're capable, are they considered in this discussion of?
Oh, absolutely. The parent is, or guardian is always a part of the IEP team decision. And prior to making the final recommendation or, supporting that recommendation from the IEP team, John Robinson, our assistant director, actually went out to meet with the Intermountain staff. He toured the facility, and if there are any other specific questions, we can probably provide that information at a later time if you'd like to know more.
Thank you. Anybody else? Are we ready to vote? All right. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. We're now moving on to 7.0 consent agenda. Where did you see that? Oh, so she said what? 7:04. Before it. Okay, so. What do you mean? So should she speak first? She should speak first? Okay. We have public comment. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, Charlotte Schindler, did you want to speak to?
Did you vote on the consent agenda?
Not yet.
No.
I want to do it after the consent agenda.
Okay.
It'll make sense in a minute.
Okay. Alrighty. Sorry. Okay. Does anybody want to pull any of the items on the consent agenda, and please tell me which one they are?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Item 7.02, 7.03, and 7.05.
7.02, 7.03, and 7.05, is that correct?
Yes.
Is there anyone else that wants to pull anything from that agenda? Going once, going twice? All right, so we're pulling 7.2, 03, and 05. Okay, so we can make a motion on the remaining ones that we are in favor of. I need a board member to do that.
I move that we approve consent agenda 7.00 minus agenda item 7.02, 7.03, and 7.05.
Second motion.
It has been moved and seconded that we approve the following consent agendas minus 7.02, 03, and 05. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Abstentions? Those consent agenda items pass. And now we're going to go to a discussion one by one on the ones that are we pulling. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so that would be, we're pulling then 7.02 would be the first one.
Yes, the reason I pulled that is the meeting minutes say that the superintendent was excused. RCW 28A.400.030 requires the superintendent attend all meetings of the Board of Directors and cause to have made a record as to the proceedings thereof. The meeting wasn't recorded like it's being recorded right now. Hi. And the superintendent wasn't there. Several emails went back and forth, and at no point was the board made aware that the superintendent was not going to attend and made a request, or had even made a request to attend. So I am concerned that it says he was excused, and I don't see how that's possible.
Well, we could have certainly had this conversation at an earlier time. I had spoken with at least 2 board members and Karen Alley, who is not here today. I did have a designee, Israel Vela, who was on campus serving as designee. And
He didn't attend the meeting.
And I, as I mentioned, I did have him as well as Karen serve as a designee. But you mentioned required by law. I'm confused by your statement.
RCW 28A.400.030, superintendent's duties, the second bullet point. Number 1, in addition to other duties as a district school board shall prescribe, the school district superintendent shall, 1, attend all meetings of the Board of Directors and cause to have made a record as to the proceedings thereof. And again,
So when you say shall, I think there's some clarification needs to be made.
Yeah, we can certainly do a little bit more research in this. I'm familiar with the statute. I think it would not prevent there from being a designee in the event that the superintendent can't attend a meeting. Certainly, we can get you more of a legal opinion on that, but in my experience in working with boards, there could be rare instances where if the superintendent was not available and a designee was appointed or at least allowed to attend in his place or her place, that could be allowed under the statute. I don't think it's prevented in the statute, but we can get you, with a little bit more research, some support for that provision, so you feel more comfortable if that's would meet your needs.
Point of clarification on that, too. I've served as the chair of the Human Service Commission for Covington, and anytime we excuse our committee, it's a vote of the committee to do that. And in this particular situation, it was just the president that was now serving, or was then serving, President Van de Gosselen, that said it was excused. Are we supposed to take a vote to do those for this kind of situation?
I'm not seeing that in the statute, and that has not been my experience.
Okay, that's just what cities that do that. Is that how that works then?
Yeah, Board President Hamada, I'm not familiar with the county or city regulation on it. I'm only familiar with the school district, but we can certainly look into that.
So you're saying the president has the ability to make that decision without the board?
I believe so, but again,
I need clarification.
I believe so, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I'd like to add to that this was a special meeting that was called on a few days before. Director Daniels was not here, and I also had another appointment, and that I canceled to be at that meeting. So I would say that in fairness, we also need to schedule appointments to make sure that everybody's available during that period. So I do want to add that to that discussion.
Absolutely.
And in fairness to that, I I'm guilty. I called the meeting because I wanted to get to work, so, and it was a request, it wasn't a demand, so I just,
I think we've discussed, we will have a follow-up. I know that part of our onboarding is to make sure that we have communication protocols, one of those being deciding and determining when meetings take place. Typically, typically Wednesdays have been reserved for meetings. That was one reason why I did and always will reserve or did reserve Wednesday. The meeting was called on Thursday, and I did have a personal appointment. And so I look forward to our follow-up, and we can certainly resolve this in the future.
appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that very much. All right. Any other discussion on that one? Director Greenwood, do you have any further on that? Everybody satisfied with that discussion? All right. Are we ready to vote on 7.02 then? All those in favor of, or do I need a motion for that? Individual ones? I need a motion for each one? Okay.
I move that we approve Agenda Item 7.02.
I second.
It has been moved and seconded that we approve 7.02 minutes of the December 2019 special meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Raise your right hand. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Abstained? Okay. The motion carries. Moving on to 7.03. Resolution number 1574, New Valley Elementary, new and in lieu, Kent Mountain View Academy Value Engineering. Okay. Discussion. Why did you?
The reason I pulled this is, again, this has come up several times recently, is this is something dated May 3rd, 2019. And I've not even been on the job for a month, and this is something that I have absolutely no experience or insight in and don't feel comfortable voting on without more insight into understanding why we're passing this resolution now and why it wasn't passed in May. So I'm just trying to get some insight into that.
President Hamada, members of the board, Dr. Watts, Ms. Holly, thank you for that question. The issue is that we only ask for value engineering in the capital planning process when we go after state matched money. So if we look at all the projects that we're doing currently in the 2016 bond, we did Covington Elementary School and the New Valley would be the only two schools that we would go out for state match money because we were eliminating classrooms and we're adding classrooms. This was done in process of the OSPI process, which in the past we have not ever brought this to the board for a presentation, although if we would like to do that, I'm all on board for a work session process because we'd have to do the value engineering and then we also have to do the constructability review. And those are two different processes that we hire a third-party consultant on top of our architects and the consultants that we've already hired, just for them to do a more in-depth take of monies that we could save on the project, and a lot of times the monies that we wouldn't want to save on the project because we here at Kent School District want to build 50-year buildings. That's what we want to build. So there's a lot of people that only want to build a 25 or a 35-year-old building. Our team wants to build 50-year-old buildings that have that capacity for sustainability. The full report is also available to you if you, upon request, as part of the recommendation clearly states.
I know I would feel more comfortable because I had some questions when I was looking over the attached documents, and I would want to know more before just saying yes or no. I think I feel more confident in my decision.
Anything specific you'd like to talk about now? I can speak to each one of them.
You're saying that everything is available for me to look at if I so wish that.
Correct.
So I'm just saying that I would like that. I would like to look at that and get a better idea of why certain things are being done or why they're not. Some of the stuff that I had a question on was, I noticed that going down the list, things were approved or disapproved, and some of them, gave a pretty good answer for why it was not, but then some of them it just said, see statute this or see this or that, and I'm like, but what is that? I would really like to know more. Not
Okay.
that I'm saying you're wrong, I just want to know more.
Sure. Well, we can have that report available to you. If that's the consensus of the board, we can definitely get that to you.
So if we didn't pass the resolution, is this time bound?
It is time bound, but we have some time, so we can put this on the next board. We can get this out, get it up this week, so you can review it for the January 22nd board.
Okay.
And just so you know, we finished our constructability review today, and we will have that so what we'll do is we'll put this constructability review. We can either do it on the 22nd or we can skip a week, because what it'll show you is where we value engineered and then where we are going to construction feasibility.
Okay. And there's only 15 I've had constituents tell me there's only 15 classrooms being built there. Is that true, or?
I'm sorry?
At this site, facility?
New Valley Elementary School, 26.
26 classrooms, okay. Okay. Yeah, I would feel more comfortable if we had more time to look at this.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we went to WASDA training for 3 days, and all the stuff that's coming across on all this stuff, it's a lot to be up to speed on. And it's not that you don't have the best intentions or you don't know what you're doing. It's just a lot for us to absorb and try to learn and grow with. So I kind of am in that ballpark too, that I'd like to learn more before I vote.
And again, I am here to help support the district in any way and the board in any way. Again, maybe a future work session would be in place for our processes to show you exactly how the capital planning team works.
Any other questions? Can we table this?
So a motion hasn't been made. We've heard from a couple of board members, but since it's already been proposed as a resolution, it'd be appropriate to call for the vote, and members can, or the directors can vote, and if you wish to table it, then vote in the nay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
And one last thought, I do want to bring this up. The Kent School District has never in the past, nor it ever will, be contingent to building buildings with state match money. We fully fund our buildings up front. We do not have to go out and par for the course, ask for money from the state. We want to make sure that we're building these buildings and that we have the residual monies available during the bond and the levy issues to be able to do that. Any extra residual money we get back goes back into contingency.
Is that a practice that other school districts use?
Absolutely. And there's a lot of them that actually count on that money.
Really? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, I will entertain a motion on 7.03.
I move to approve agenda item 7.03.
I second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve agenda number 7.03. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand and saying aye. All those opposed to resolution 7.03 signify by saying nay and raising your right hand.
No.
And abstentions. The motion has not passed. And can we put this on the agenda at this point for the next board session? Okay, all right. Table it then. All right. On to 7.05, which is renewal. How do you pronounce that? Inuit?
Inuit, yes. You had it right, absolutely.
I just, I pulled it because I want to know, the numbers that you provided in board docs. It looks really low. It looks like a low percentage of employees participated. And my question is, 202 modules were taken, 333 staff participated, and how many staff members do we currently have?
Well, I worked off a rough estimate getting that question later this evening. About 10% of our staff accessed Who Knew It between February and mid-December, which is when we pulled the data.
Do these measures, the 39 modules and the 25 and the 42, do these take into account any modules that were not completed, like started and not completed?
No, these were all completed modules.
And does the system track incomplete?
I'm not sure, and again, when we received the question, I wasn't able to ascertain the answer to that.
And is there any way for the system to allow for the people who participate to give feedback?
Not at this time.
Okay.
Other than the surveys that we do as a district, informal input, meeting with labor associations to review their achievement programs, certificate programs, et cetera.
Just a bit of context that I think is important for the board as a whole. We had a form, Atomic Learning, in the past and did not continue to use that because it had not been used effectively. And so we brought to the board last December our plans to use Who Knew It, and specifically to use Title II funds. So Title II allows us to not only pay for recruitment expenses and a variety of other things, but it's mainly for our professional development. And so this provides an opportunity. So when we built our grant for the Title II grant, we built Who Knew It into that. An important component to this program is not that it just provides online learning opportunities for our teachers, but for our entire group of employees. And so we also noted that the achievement certificates for our paraeducators, our KSFSA, which is our food nutrition services workers, and our non-represented staff, this is an opportunity for them to earn their achievement certificates in a variety of professional development. We do have for you, if you're interested, and we brought it with us tonight, a full list of all of the courses, not all of them, but an overview. I shouldn't get too excited. An overview of the courses. I'm going to provide that to Ms. Holly.
There are over 1,700 modules. I think an important thing to note when you're looking at the numbers is this was a year of getting this program up and running. There were not 39 modules available for paraeducators starting in February to use towards their achievement certificates. The 42 modules that have been built and set up for non-reps to access and use towards achievement certificates just happened in the last month or so. So this took a lot of meeting with labor associations, developing their needs and using that to get things up and running. So we've just got our feet under ourselves. I'm very encouraged by the numbers based on this really just getting up and running. And also teaching people how they can use it, how they can access it, the variety of purposes they can use it for. We have a lot of people that just use it for personal tutorials as they're learning new computer programs or how to use Teams, et cetera. So I see the potential for this as being very, very encouraging.
And the requirements just changed for paraeducators, correct? That they need their training, and so this is a means of them getting their
This
training
is not, the modules don't apply to the fundamental course of study because that's very, very structured and defined by the state. And so, but this does apply to our labor association bargain certificates of achievement that they can earn that go towards pay or stipend per their bargaining agreement.
Okay.
And it's also available if it fits the requirement for their effective ed, that they don't necessarily, they can use it towards that too. But this is specifically, there are modules identified specifically for the achievement certificates.
In the renewal notice, it talked about how the system can be available to parents and students. I'm just wondering, is that component available for Kent School District students and parents?
It's available. We haven't explored it deeply to date because our Title II funding is really about teacher professional development, and we want to make sure our staff knows how to use it, but that's on the table.
Okay,
It's something we're looking at.
And so and you guys decide to roll that out, my concern is about language barrier. Is it going to be available in, other languages for parents to look at?
Right. I can't answer that question tonight, but that's certainly something with all of our website material and all of our communications. That's always a question on the table, and that we work with our communications department to address those questions for everything we do in terms of working with our parents.
Any other questions, discussion? All right. I would ask a board member for a motion to accept 7.05.
I make a motion that we approve renewal of the Who Knew It contract.
I second.
It has been moved and second to renew 7.05, the renewal of the Who Knew It contract. All those in favor, raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It has passed, 7.05. And now we are on to, you wanted to speak now, Charlotte.
Approve the consent agenda. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. She's talking about.
I'm Charlotte Schindler. I'm currently serving as the PSE State President, and we represent the KOP group. And this is Kathy Blackstone, the president of the KOP group. And first, I want to thank you for volunteering to serve on your school board. It's a very important job, and it is time-consuming, and we know you're volunteers, and so we really appreciate it, which means you have a heart for education and a heart for kids. We would like to thank you for recognizing the contribution that our members make to your Kent School District, with your staff, students, and to the 42 schools you serve, and also to your community. Many of them live here and support the schools. Our members would now like to present you with a small, de minimis amount token of our appreciation.
Oh my gosh.
We don't want an ethics violation, so that's why I said it was de minimis.
Very much.
And I would like to thank you for this opportunity of to speak to you. And now Kathy would like to speak.
When we began this process, you approved tonight our wage reopener, and we thank you for that. We began in the fall with the HR team negotiating this wage reopener from an interesting beginning to where we are now. And I have worked in the Kent School District since 1991, and we have never received a contract or a wage increase like this. And so the members have rallied. We have a few here tonight that are on the board, and they want to thank you for that. But I want to give a special shout out to the HR team that we worked with in negotiations. And I know that's not usual, but we partnered with them, and I want to just say Joellen Verdeau and Tiffany Phelps worked with us from day one, getting what was fair and right for both parties for the work that we do and the respect that the members deserve. And we wanted to just say thank you for that. We do appreciate it. And we work 110% every day for every student in this district. So,
And we
thank you.
will replace the old signs in car windows with these.
Okay, we're up to 8.0, 8 informational, 8.01. And that is superintendent evaluation, goals, and key performance indicators.
just informational, so we don't take a vote on it.
Do we have any discussion, or what are we doing here?
If I may, there was a question about why this is here under informational, and I believe part of it might have been because Director Daniels was not here, and we had a discussion, and I don't know if there were any other input or changes.
Okay.
Are you ready to move on? All right, communication 9.0 and 9.01. Communication from the audience. I only have one card, and that's Mr. Lee. It looks like he's heading this way. He's taking the scenic route.
Good evening, Dr. Watts, Board President Hamada, and board members. And yes, you are correct. Let's see, that was the scenic route. So what I'd like to speak to tonight is related to personnel issues and the what I believe to be a concern that our community has changed. I've been here since 1979. This was not a very diverse community when I first moved here. It is now a very beautiful and very diverse community. One of the goals that we've tried to reach in the Kent School District is to hire and retain a more diverse staff. Too often, when that diverse staff is hired, for whatever reason, they disappear. And we never seem to be able to get over the hump. I don't know what the problem is, but I believe there to be a problem. I don't know what that problem is. I would like to encourage the Kent School Board and our community to begin to engage in a conversation, do some research, and find out why that is that we cannot retain a diverse staff. I've sat here in this particular room pretty regularly since the early 90s for various reasons. And that's always been a topic of conversation. So I would I would like to strongly encourage the board and our community to begin that process and engage in that conversation to see if we can't understand why we cannot retain diverse staff once hired. Thank you.
Okay, and that concludes all the communication from the audience. We're on to 9.02, the legislative update, and that would be Director Van de Gossel.
Oh, yes. Okay, all right. Well, I'm excited about my new role, and I know that my predecessors, Director Hardy and Director Burchard, have done significant work for our district when it comes to paying attention to our legislative priorities. And I was really excited going to the Legislative Assembly the last few years and seeing democracy at work and how much of an influence our district has in terms of prioritizing what we want to be the main focus during the legislative discussions. And so I'm excited about the role, and there are some things that are coming up. Our Day on the Hill, where we take our students to the legislature to talk about what their priorities are as well in education. But the superintendents also gather at Puget Sound ESD to come up with their priorities, and I took a look at what they've come up with, as well as what our own organization, WASDA, which is our school district directors group. I always forget what that stands for, but our school directors professional organization. And frankly, all of the priorities are very similar in that special education funding is right up there for everybody. As most of you probably know, that prior to the 2019 session, OSBI identified special education needed somewhere around $300 million or more, and the 2019-21 budget only provided about $80 million. So there's a much needed investment in the safety net, and it's yet far from fully being funded. So that is all of these professional organizations, one of their major priorities will be to increase that multiplier so that special education is covered. So going back to the discussion about the levy and what that covers, there's a general sense that, we are fully funded, and McCleary funded everything necessary to manage our district. But in fact, as you can see, we are nowhere near what the funding is. And if we have to take $150,000 for one student to place, we have to think about how are we going to meet all of these requirements without the additional funding coming through. And so that's foremost on their mind, as well as the impacts of the school employee benefits. That program, also the new benefit program and the state funding didn't align properly, and so there's going to be discussions about that as well in the upcoming legislation as a priority. And then, of course, our student and staff safety. There was a policy that just passed that HB 1216, and it was supposed to be a comprehensive statewide delivery model, coordinating with school staff and mental health providers and so forth. But they passed the policy, but then less than 25% of the activities were funded. So that's going to be also a big priority for our and along with that, the staff allocation formulas, kind of looking at what our prototypical funding model looks like and changing that model. That's also a priority with our teachers and staff members, all educators. So there's a lot happening in the next several months. And so one of the things that our WASDA, our organizations, put out is how we can sort of take part in all of these activities, and that would include kind of tracking the bills and the committees and attending the legislative day, the day, they call it Day on the Hill. I think it's February, early February. We can all go and meet our legislators, championing any issues that we can work on with our other districts. That's going to be one of my also participation will be working with other board members, coming together. We've done that in the past where we were actually put down policies together as districts, and we haven't done it in the last few years, but I'm looking forward to doing that and being a strong force, because we, as Kent School District, we have something like 11 votes, that we can use to prioritize our legislative opportunities. So I'm looking forward to that, and then looking forward to a Day on the Hill with our students. That'll be a first for me. So that's my update.
All right, now we're on to 9.03, board reports and discussion. Let's start with Director Bowen. Don't have anything tonight? Okay. All right. Director?
Hi. Thank you, everyone, for being here. The meeting's shorter tonight. I was really excited to see the Northwood Choir singing. Mr. Gordon is also the choir director at Kent Ridge, and so he'll see my son at 6:40 tomorrow morning. So when he left, he didn't even have 12 hours before he had to turn around and go teach. So I also got the opportunity to see the winter concert at Kent Ridge, and it was beautiful. I just, for the teachers that are out in the room and the staff, I looked at the thought exchange results, and there were some pretty loud and clear messages. I hear you from that. It's on the website if you want to look at it. That there's a lot of concern about behavior. There's some concern about learning first. There's some distrust in the district. There's requests, that the board and the superintendent work together. But I hear you loud and clear. I'm looking at that, and, it came out loud and clear that the staff who participated in that thought exchange are really concerned about the kids and what's happening in our schools. And I'm concerned about the behavior that floated up to the top. I think as a board, we're still working to establish a solid foundation to do the best work that we can do. And that's been difficult. I'll be completely, perfectly honest. I have never worked in a supervisory role, and I don't even have access to the superintendent's calendar. The board doesn't have access. And we, haven't had a chance to sit down with the superintendent and talk about goals. And policies are out of date, severely out of date. And we're being given things late and last minute and being asked to vote on them. And as you can see, we're trying to be very thoughtful. At least I know I am, and I'm getting the impression from all the rest of my board directors that we're trying to be thoughtful about what we vote on and take this job as seriously as possible. And it's hours and hours of work once you get looking at these documents, if you really take the time to look at these documents. And I know that that can get difficult. So that's where I am there. Coming up, I'm going to the Fairwood PTSA meeting next week. Invite me to your schools. I would love to go to your schools. I'm going to start going to all the schools in my district, which is District 2, which is essentially the Kent Ridge Strand. To that end, I invite everyone to attend the Martin Luther King rally at Kent Ridge on Thursday, January 16th at 7 p.m. This is an event that Kent Ridge has done for several years, and it's open to all students, high school students in the district, to participate. It's an amazing event. I've gone every year, and it is a rally to celebrate and honor the life and work of Dr. Martin Luther King. The students themselves work with the director there at Kent Ridge, and they work with the Fifth Avenue Theater to create this program every year. So every year it's new and different, and it's based on what is important to these kids and how they want to share Dr. King's message. And it's amazing. And the City of Kent is sponsoring it. So again, it's on the Kent Ridge website on their calendar. So again, I thank you all for being here, and those who spoke. It's always good to hear what you have to say, and I invite that. And I've talked enough. Thank you.
I have just finished my report on the legislative front, so that's what I'll be working on. But I also want to thank our principal at Kent Mountain Valley View Academy. I'll finally get it. Yes, for giving us a tour. Actually, Director Bowen was there as well, and giving us a tour of the new place. If you haven't had a chance to go take a look. They've done some incredible work there. And so I'm looking forward to seeing also what is happening with our newer buildings coming up, Panther Lake, and taking a tour of that. And yes, all good from Dave. So I just want to thank everybody for being here and hope you had a good holiday. Thank you all.
So I too want to thank everyone for being here. So I hope you enjoyed a restful time, whatever that looks like for you. I know that I was completely off the radar, which I rarely get, for about 2 weeks, and it was well worth it. So I was able to get refreshed, and I am looking forward to the upcoming years. I, too, am very excited about the Martin Luther King. It's a fantastic performance. If you've not been, it is a combination of many students, and so I'm very excited about that. And I'm also looking forward to seeing, what the students have, and hearing what the students have to say. I do get to talk to them quite frequently, so I always enjoy hearing from them. I was thrilled with their performance as well. I think we should start all of our meetings with students. That's my opinion, because that is a good reminder of this is why we're here.
I second that.
And so maybe that's something we can begin to incorporate in our meetings. But thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your time, and thank you for what you do for all of our students. It's appreciated.
Well, first of all, thanks for putting up with me for running this meeting. I've run a lot of meetings, but this is a little different, so I'm a little rocky. But I'll get there eventually, or you can kick me around and get me there or something. Anyway, I appreciate you all showing up tonight and taking an interest in this school district. As you obviously can see, I'm a more mature lady, so my kids are not attending these schools, but now I feel, and I always have with whatever I've done, work with kids, they're all my kids. And when I've been driving up downtown to a meeting or going to my church to a meeting, coming from Covington, I'm up there way beyond Covington, and I often be going early in the morning and passing all these kids waiting for the school buses, and I feel a very, very deep sense of responsibility to be here to help all your kids and help them all succeed, because they all go at different levels. I mentored in 5 different school districts for many, many years, so I've seen kids on all different levels. And I've been mentored here in this school district for 6 years. And it's amazing the variety and where they're going with their lives. And I still communicate with all my kids that we're in our Candy's Tail Boxing Club, and I'm watching them go off to try to be police and firefighters and all that. It's amazing what these kids are doing. So thank you for coming. I enjoyed going to the Kent Phoenix Academy pancake breakfast and had a nice chat with the principal there, and watched the other group strut across the area with their PJs on because it was pajama day, so they've got a lot going on there. So I also love being out in the schools. I've been pretty amazed, even though I now have so many cell phones and laptops and passwords that I've added to my schedule that it's kind of mind-boggling. But I'm amazed that I am not hearing from more people. My email's out there available, my phone number's out there available, and the only way we can do this job is to contact us and talk to us, because one thing I'm really good about listening, so please do that. And thank you for being here tonight, and we actually have concluded this a lot earlier than our swearing-in ceremony, so we're making progress, right? Thank you again, appreciate it, love the kids tonight, love seeing them sing. It's just, that's what we're here all about, our kids. Thank you. And now we're going to adjourn the meeting.